Good morning. I am Robert White, council member at large and chair of the Committee on Housing. Today is January 30th, 2025. The time is 9:39 a.m. and we are meeting in room 412 of the John A. Wilson Building. I'm calling to order this performance oversight hearing on three agencies under the purview of the Committee on Housing. But before we do, I'd like us to take a moment of silence for the lives lost in the midair collision last night. And as we do that, I hope we will reflect on, the preciousness and unpredictability of life and what that means for how we live each day. So we'll take a brief moment of silence. Today, we are going to hear testimonies both from the public and from our agency representatives on three agencies under the purview of the Committee on Housing, the Real Estate Commission, the Board of Real Estate Appraisers, and the Office of the Tenant Advocate. Since this is our first performance oversight hearing of the two-year council period, let me just take a moment to explain what these hearings are all about, because some people watch this and don't get the joy of coming to all these hearings. Performance oversight is a year-round process for us. My staff and I are constantly engaging with district residents and at community events and stakeholder meetings and constituent services, phone calls, and in email threads with thoughtful residents about their experiences with DC government. And then we're constantly taking that feedback to our agency contacts, depending on the agency. I might have a standing meeting with the director. My staff might have regular check-ins with their staff. We might sit in on their monthly public meetings, and we definitely share tips and questions directly with the agencies and commissions as special issues arise. Even so, these annual hearings that the council holds every spring are an opportunity to zoom it out and identify what we think the biggest issues are and touch base with agency leaders to publicly set shared goals. For our larger agencies, we'll discuss the goals that they publicly committed to during the last year's oversight hearing. If you hear me talk about SMART goals, that's a reference to the specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound framework that organizations use to make sure their metrics are useful. This helps promote accountability, which is something we have to expect inside of government as we do outside of government, and we have to hold ourselves accountable. Inviting the public to testify helps us as a government leaders make extra sure that the issues we're focused on are the same issues that are relevant to people's everyday lives. The agencies on today's agenda play a crucial role in regulating our housing market and protecting tenants and consumers. We're going to start with public witness testimony and then hear from the leadership of the Real Estate Commission, or REC, and the Board of Real Estate Appraisers, or BREA. The REC regulates the licenses of real estate professionals and upholds the district's real estate laws and regulations. Their goal is to protect all consumers affected by the real estate industry and ensure they receive professional treatment. The REC consists of 9 members, all selected by the mayor. It consists of 3 real estate brokers, 2 real estate salespeople, 2 property managers, 1 real estate attorney, and 1 member of the public who does not have a real estate license and represents consumer interests. I'm looking forward to hearing from the REC chair about how we can support their work and continue to refine the licensing system. BREA regulates estate appraisals, which is a key component of our housing ecosystem. The board consists of 5 members, all appointed by the mayor. 3 members must be licensed real estate appraisers, 1 must be a real estate broker, and 1 is a consumer member. In recent years, we focused on working with the board to ensure the appraisal process properly serves every member of the district. Homes hold immense value, both emotionally and as sources of generational wealth, and it's essential that appraisals be fair and accurate. We are particularly aware of the impact that racial disparities in appraisals can have on our residents. I'm committed to ongoing collaboration with BREA to ensure the appraisal process is fair and the real estate profession is accessible to everyone. After REC and BREA, we'll call up the Office of the Tenant Advocate, or OTA. OTA provides legal services, technical advice, and financial assistance when tenants are in need. They also educate tenants about their legal rights and advocate on their behalf in front of the council and the courts. OTA services are a crucial element of ensuring everyone in our community has a safe place to live and a full understanding of their rights. I look forward to hearing from OTA about housing market and protecting tenants and consumers. We are going to start with public witness testimony and then hear from the leadership of the Real Estate Commission and the Board of Real Estate Appraisers. I'm sorry, I went back. The agencies on today's agenda play a crucial role in regulating. I lost my place. There we go. I look forward to hearing OTA. Okay, there we are. I look forward to hearing from OTA about their work, their community engagement, and how we can work together to address the most pressing issues that tenants face today. Don't have any colleagues here yet, so we will start by moving into our public witness testimony. Before we start hearing testimony, I want to lay out the ground rules for our public witnesses and our government witnesses. Everyone should have received a copy of the witness list yesterday. I'll call those on our witness list in panels. When I do, the staff will promote each witness from Zoom attendee to Zoom panelist so that you can testify. When you're promoted, you'll drop out of the hearing momentarily and come back into the hearing as a panelist, after which you'll be able to unmute yourself. Public witnesses will have 4 minutes to testify. Advisory neighborhood commissioners will have 5 minutes to testify. Agency witnesses will have 15 minutes to testify. As a final note, if you see us looking down during your testimony, it is typically because I am taking notes and my team is managing the Zoom part of this hearing. That's important for me to know because I want to make sure you know I am listening, but I have to take notes in order to help remember and process what people say. And I want to make sure people don't feel disrespected when they come to our committee. I will now call up our first panel of witnesses. All right, I am not sure who's here with us at this moment. We have 11 public witnesses signed up, so let me start calling names and see who is with us. Rochelle Ellison with the People for Fairness Coalition. I don't see Rochelle in the room, and I don't see her online. Robert Warren with the People for Fairness Coalition, who I also don't see. Aquarius Van Gosri, who I don't see. Walter Morton is with us online. Brandon Edwards. Keisha Howard. Nicole Grooms. Stephanie McGill. Courtney Tolbert. Star Bowie. And Tony Davis. You can come here. You'll be on the first panel. All right. At this point, Walter Morton and Tony Davis are with us. If other public witnesses join before we conclude the public witness panel, we will add them. So let me start with Walter Morton, who is with us virtually. Welcome, and you can begin your testimony.
Hi, good morning, Councilman White. I'm not sure. Can you see me?
Cannot see you. I can hear you, but cannot see you.
Let me see. Let me. thought it was on the camera, but he can hear me. Stop me. Okay, well, can you hear me, Councilman White?
Yeah, you can proceed.
Okay.
Oh, there, we can see you now too.
Yeah, my goddaughter's mother grabbed the holder of the camera to help me out.
No problem here.
I'm advocating on behalf of Ms. Shamika Vaughn. We had some issues. She had some issues dealing with some pests that were running around. I forwarded to your office by your email because I testified before you, I guess maybe 2 years ago on the returning citizen board. I guess it was like getting part of 22 or 23. No, it was 23. I reached out to your office asking for help on her behalf. She was dealing with being removed from one of the housing agencies that assist. What was it? Rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing. Yeah, Exeter from the program. We just recently found out that our voucher has been approved, but the current situation is going on with the pests in the house. The children are constantly going to the hospital. There's notation dealing with the outcome of their diagnosis from the doctor saying that this seems to be a main part of them being sick. I have sent you several photos of the pests, mice, and little rats that been trapped in their apartment, and they're constantly running through there. I just moved up here last year. I guess it was September or something. I signed in the lease. My apartment is freshly remodeled. Her apartment at 130 Irvington 204, it's not. I'm mainly concerned about the children. And Eagle Crossing seems to, they come over and send constant pest people in. They're not doing anything about that. It needs to be corrected. Someone needs to reach out to the property manager. They have changed property managers within the last 90 days. I'm reaching out to you because I know for a fact that your voice seems to hold a real strong entity in Ward 8. I know Mr. Also Trayon Wright has a lot of say so. But these issues are just not only with her, it's several people in this complex that are going through that. So I said that I reach out to you and see what could be done that will make the property management do something about the issue or correct it where they'll be able to live freely and from home.
Thank you very much. I hope you're able to hold for just a few minutes so I can follow up with a few questions.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, welcome. If you hit that button, there we are, and you can begin your testimony.
Chairperson White, council members, my name is, please hear my plea. My name is Tony Davis. I live in Ward 1. I am 2 months behind rent. In fact, in the next few days, I'll be 3 months behind rent. EREP is a one-stop shop that helps people like me, that emergency rental assistance program helps individuals like me that are in dire need of rental assistance help. I've contacted 211 for help, 311 for help. I've been in correspondence with government representatives for help and assistance. And it seemed like everything is pointing back to EREP. It's been very tough for me, very hard. And I really need help for my rent. I greatly need help. I've called. I've had a list, and I've called various social agencies, and a lot of them been pointing back to ERAP. It's been difficult for me. In fact, I there was one agency that not all of the agencies that associated with EREP, but there was one agency that talked to EREP and made me feel less um, as a person in terms of not as I was talking to them, see if they knew any other programs that might be able to help me, and they just disregarded me. It's been very hard for me, and I'm not the only one. And I'm just asking for help. Please help us. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I don't know the particulars of your case, and we don't need to get into it here. We can follow up outside of the hearing. And in fact, somebody from our team can touch base with you before you leave. With ERAP, there are a couple things relevant here. It's an incredibly important program, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. I've led the council in adding tens of millions over the past 2 years, and even that has not nearly been enough. We're working to reform ERAP because there are some folks who, hit a bump in the road, as most of us do at a certain point, and ERAP can help them catch up, and then they can stay on. And there are some folks who have fallen so far behind that ERAP would be a drop in the bucket, and they still wouldn't be able to catch up. And between the folks who meet the income eligibility for the program, they need to be prioritized. The folks who, with the help of ERAP, will be able to stay in their units, they need to be prioritized. But those things do mean that we need to make some appropriate reforms to the program, and we need to make sure buildings don't get foreclosed on, because then everybody loses their housing, and we lose affordable housing, which is unfair to the city. Which agency did you speak to that made you feel less than?
Can I talk to you offline about that?
Certainly.
I'd rather deal with it from a professional perspective. My background is in telecommunications, and just an example that, like with networks and with major telecommunications buildings, that they usually have 2 service providers.
Mhm.
So if a network goes down on the primary, they have a secondary so that they can maintain the telecommunications, the data connections, and everything else. Can we please find something that's a secondary that can help someone like me? And I know others that are going through it. Please,
Yeah. Okay.
my player.
All right. We'll touch base with you as soon as you come off this panel and get details, your contact information, and see how we can help. And I hope that we can. So I appreciate you coming here. And we do have some work to do in the ERAP program, but we also need to make sure people feel respected. So I'm going to work to get all of those details and address that. So I appreciate you being with us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Morton, you had sent us some photos, but we needed a bit more context, and I think our recommendation was to contact the Department of Buildings, which is the agency that's supposed to come out and inspect things like that. Have you done that, or do you know if Ms. Barnes has done that?
Ms. Vaughn is present right here with me in the living room. So
Okay, excellent.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. When I was in the rapid program before they kicked me out the program, I had an inspection of this month. I had 3 inspections. They failed all 3 emergency inspections. And then I called my caseworker, told my caseworker, she told me, okay, on a Monday, I'm gonna call you and let you know what's going on, what's the next steps. She texted me and emailed me and said that I was out of the program. And I'm like, so okay, what's going on with the emergency move? Nothing after that.
All right, well, let's do this. I'd like to have us be able to get in contact with you directly, Ms. Barnes. So we will, someone from my team will come offline and touch base through Mr. Morton, because I think we have your contact information. So you'll hear from us with the next probably 15 minutes. We'll get information and we'll work on this.
All right.
All right.
I appreciate that, Councilman White.
I appreciate it. Mr. Moore, thank you very much for assisting here. We'll make sure we get this taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, y'all done a lot for me. I'm currently now, by me being a returning citizen, I'm a SPO for Ally University. So I'm at home for 24 days. I appreciate y'all's support and my license.
You're doing great work. And we'll get the address again from you too when we reach out. So again, within the next 15 minutes or less, you'll hear from us.
All right.
All right. Thank you both so much. And to those babies, have a good day as well. Do we have any other? Okay, Commissioner Trupti Patel will join our next panel. And if there's any other members of the public who wish to join in person or online, this will be our final public panel. So if you're online, please let us know. If you're in person, please come up to the front table and we will turn to Commissioner Trupti Patel. Welcome. Commissioner Patel, you can begin your testimony.
Good morning, Councilmember Robert White. Thank you for hosting this hearing. My name is Trupti Patel. I am a fourth-term ANC commissioner that represents Single-Member District 2A03, which is the historic Foggy Bottom, and I am also, until for the next 2 days, the chairperson of ANC 2A. And so I'm here today to talk about how vital and how important the Office of Tenant Advocate is. The mission of the Office of Tenant Advocate is to provide technical advice and other legal services to tenants regarding disputes with landlords, to educate and inform the community about tenant rights and rental housing matters, to advocate for the rights and interests of district renters in the legislative, regulatory, and judicial arenas, and to provide financial assistance to displaced renters for certain emergency housing and tenant relocation expenses. I came before you last year when I was dealing with an unethical realtor. Really hostile situation. My unit did end up getting sold to a brand new landlord. And that's the story I'm here to talk to you about today, is that one. So the minute my landlord had officially owned this unit, he started blowing up my cell phone, texting me and saying, I have to meet with you right away. And I said, well, I can't meet with you right away. I can meet with you in a week. And he goes, no, I'm flying out of the country. You're going to make time out of your calendar. So after working an 8-hour shift, I had to meet with him at 9 p.m. Where he essentially tried to violate my rights. He tried to present me with a lease, which he then tried to say, well, I can't force you to sign it, but your new rent's going to be $2,000. What he didn't know was that I actually contacted the Office of Tenant Advocate, had an amazing attorney who gave me all the information, told me exactly what to ask for. He said, you have to be presented with a RAD form. You have to be given a RAD number to prove that the landlord has indeed registered. So until then, he can't sit here and force you to sign any new leases, do any rent increases. So during this hostile meeting with my new landlord, the landlord was trying to say that he was asking me very inappropriate questions. He was asking me what I did for a living, how much of my income was for rent. And my thought process, I was very calm, but inside I was seething and raging. This man was attempting to denigrate and humiliate me. He clearly didn't want me as a tenant. And he was trying to find any which way to get me out of my home that I've lived in for now 22 years. I just, you know, skirted around the questions. I said, paying the rent is not an issue for us. And then I informed him that there is a cooling off period. You don't get to jack my rent up overnight. He didn't seem to believe me, pretty hostile. Then he backed off. And then in the month of September, my stove broke. It was to the point that I had to call the DC fire department because my oven wasn't shutting off. So there was a possibility of a gas explosion. DC fire department showed up on premise, disabled the stove, said the stove was faulty, and instructed me to contact my landlord immediately, which I did. It took 21 days for me to get a functioning stove. So I pretty much lost $600 to $800 worth of food and having to eat out to feed myself. And when I asked him about getting a rent credit, since I was without a stove, and told him that by law I'm supposed to have a functioning stove, he became very ugly and hostile and said, I better not deduct any money from my rent, and then proceeded to accuse me of breaking the stove and running a cooking business out of my home. This man was very much attempting to humiliate and denigrate me. And, you know, this man wants to say he's a small time landlord. Like, he's not privy to any of the rules and regulations he's supposed to follow. And I could weather a lot of this humiliation and denigration because OTA kept informing me of my rights. I've literally been working with OTA for almost well over a year now, and their team has been nothing but incredible. And I'm sharing this story with you to say, like, you know, a lot of these landlords, they're doing the bare minimum to get their basic business license, and you know, they go to RAD and get their RAD number. Currently, my landlord, or I should call him a slumlord, was so eager to slam me with the rent increase, he violated the 90-day rule that is written in the law about, you know, giving me proper notice. That's one. Two, then he didn't even want to abide by the fact that there is a 60-day notice after the 90-day notice expires. So just this week, OTA had to send my landlord clarifying that these were my rights. And then my landlord had the nerve to have an attorney friend of his reach out to the OTA attorney and basically tell the OTA attorney he doesn't know what he's talking about.
I'm going to pause you, Commissioner. We are a bit over time on your testimony. I appreciate you being with us. I think your story that I'm really sad to hear about illustrates why it is important that we have an agency like OTA, because the average person doesn't know their rights as a tenant. Average resident in the district doesn't have the resources to get legal counsel to even help figure out how to navigate or resolve an issue. And we have an obligation to protect our residents. So well, I am really sorry to hear about this situation. I think anybody would hate to have to live through. I'm glad that at least we had an agency that could, you know, assist to some degree. So I appreciate. I'm not going to get into the details of the issue here, but your testimony does illustrate why OTA is such an important agency for residents, particularly for renters, which is the majority of district residents.
Councilmember, I wanted to share like just some recommendations on how I think OTA could improve. I mean, they're fantastic agency. These are just observations that I've made and stories that I've heard. If I could just have like 30 seconds to spit them out, and I have
Please do.
everything in writing. So basically the first recommendation that I have is that OTA have an emergency after hours line that is functional all 7 days a week. A lot of these landlords are, you know, committing a lot of these egregious acts during hours and days that they can't get in touch with OTA. Um, basically OTA is critical and crucial to the safety and health of DC residents, especially vulnerable renters. I'd like to actually have you expand the OTA team. I think we actually need to increase the size of the agency. And then while there's a lot of community outreach that's done, I'd like to see OTA focus specifically within the college student population. It came to my attention that the Georgetown student community had to actually mobilize and organize against their landlords because their rights were being exploited. And when I got told this, I said, did anyone call the Office of Tenant Advocate? And these students were shocked. They said they didn't even know about the existence of the agency. And it just goes to show, like, no matter how much we say to the public that there are resources, sometimes in times of crisis, they don't know. So I do know OTA has been working with the colleges around the city, but I'd just like to see them beef that up more. And so thank you for giving me the extra time just to give you those recommendations.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being with us. I will, yes, please.
Good morning. My name is Ahmad Nuruddin. I live at 740 6th Street Southwest, Washington, D.C. We've talked a bit about an issue with asbestos in a rental property. I don't have a formal testimony, but as I'm listening, it was hard to just come and not say something on the record. I'd like the opportunity to give you a more formal statement, but I live in a 3-bedroom unit. I've had reside with me a 100-year-old cousin, all the way down to a 3-year-old great-grandson. So there's multi-generations there, my children and my grandchildren in addition to them. So asbestos in the unit, and I'm sure you know where asbestos, you can have the exposure and it can take a very long time before it shows up fully adversely impacting your health. As I'm listening to the tenant advocate, it sounds like a resource that could be awfully helpful. As I listened to the prior person speak and she talked about rent credit, this landlord has offered me rent credit for the time that it took for them to abate one of the instances, but in the 2 other rooms, one I turned in the bills for and they never gave the credit. The second one, I turned in the bills, and although they offered rent credit, they never gave me the credit. In that particular room, the asbestos has not been abated. It is a long story, and I don't want to take up any more of the time, particularly since I just said to Francesca that I wasn't going to do it, but just listening to the prior person, I was just compelled to come and say something. But if it does half of what I'm hearing that the office is able to do, I need their help.
Well, the top players at the Office of Tenant Advocate are right behind you, so I suggest you engage them while they are a captive audience. Literally. And then keep us posted on, how that goes and whether you think there are gaps that need to be filled. And what I'll say on, I think, all of these testimonies, I don't mind if folks come to our hearing to get help addressing issues. Sometimes people feel like that's necessary, but not everybody wants to sort of air out their issues, you know, in a hearing. And so I want to make sure people know you can call my office or email us. The number is 202-724-8174. If you have a housing issue, email us at housing@dccouncil.gov. Again, I do not mind if people come to testify. It's helpful for me, and I think for the public. Sometimes it lets people know, oh, I'm not crazy. Other people are going through this, but I also don't want people to feel like they have to come here to a hearing in order to get an issue addressed. You may have to miss work, or you know, just not feel like talking about the issues in public. And so I encourage people, again, come to the hearing or reach out to us by phone or by email, and we will address it all the same. But I do want to make sure we're doing everything we can to help and protect residents. The government can't do everything. I recognize that. I think most people recognize that. But we need to continue to challenge ourselves to say what's the most we can do and what's the best we can do it. And that's the standard I try to hold our agencies and our committee to.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And it's always good to see you. We turn now to our government witnesses, Chairperson Tamora Pappas of the Board of Real Estate Appraisers and Chairperson Ed Downs of the Real Estate Commission. If you would come to the witness table, I appreciate you all being with us today. As you come up, I will remind you, although Ed, this might be your first time, we always act, good for you to know each other. But I appreciate your service and the service of your fellow board and commission members. So you can feel free to be seated, but I will, before you begin your testimony, as a practice, swear in all of our government witnesses. So I'll ask that you raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the full truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you so much. You can have a seat. And Ms. Pappas, I believe you are testifying first.
Good morning, Chairperson White and members and staff of the Committee on Housing. My name is Tamara K. Pappas, and I have the pleasure of serving as the chairperson of the District of Columbia Board of Real Estate Appraisers. Thank you for inviting me to testify on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser to discuss the activities and accomplishments of the board in fiscal year 2024 and 2025 to date. I would like to thank the board staff and the legal counsel and the superb job they do to facilitate all the many activities of the board. The board consists of 4 current members, including Andrew Sullivan, appraiser member, Martin Skolnick, appraiser member, Anthony Bowling, real estate broker member, and myself, appraiser member. Although the public emergency and the public health emergency have ended, certain operations that were implemented during the time continue as we have allowed the board to be more efficient and better meet the needs of the public. Specifically, the board continues to meet remotely and has transitioned to the Zoom platform from the Cisco WebEx platform. This virtual platform provides for greater attendance by the public and appraiser licensees. The board has successfully held all its scheduled meetings virtually, and the feedback has been favorable. Regarding fiscal year 2024, The DC Board of Real Estate Appraisers continues to be uniquely situated as the only professional licensing board within the Occupational and Professional Licensing Administration that is federally regulated under Title 11 of the Financial Institutions Reform, Recovery, Enforcement Act of 1989, formerly referred to as FIREA. Accordingly, the board is mandated by Congress to allow FIREA, to follow FIREA as amended and its accompanying rules and regulations. Additionally, FIREA created the Appraisal Subcommittee, or the ASC, to ensure that federal financial and public policy interests in the real estate transaction are protected by requiring that real estate appraisals utilized in connection with federally related transactions are performed in writing in accordance with uniform standards and by individual, my pages here. Oh, sorry about that.
I ended up 2 pages off, so you're doing better than me.
I did get it. Let me see, what was that there? In accordance with uniform standards and by individuals whose competency has been demonstrated and whose professional conduct will be subject to effective supervision. In general, the ASC oversees the real estate appraisal regulatory framework as it relates to federally related transactions as defined in Title 11. Throughout fiscal year 24 and to present, the board reviewed exposure drafts issued by the Appraisal Foundation's Appraisal Qualifications Board and the Appraisal Standards Board. The board also reviewed the proposed rules on the Appraisal Subcommittee Enforcement Authority regarding the effectiveness of the state appraiser and appraisal management company regulatory programs. During fiscal year 24 and 25 respectively, 74 new applicants were approved for licensure in 4 categories, including trainee, licensed residential, certified residential, and certified general. The ASC requires that an audit be conducted every 2 years. I'll get ahead of myself here. Every 2 years to verify that the board is maintaining compliance with FIREA. The board and staff members provide periodic reports to the ASC, as well as timely updates regarding disciplinary actions. The disciplinary actions are entered into the national database maintained by FIREA. The Appraisal Subcommittee will be conducting an on-site review March 25 through 27, 2025, with the board and the DLCP. Put it in here too tight. Real estate appraisals are the result of the evaluation of several complex factors. The nature of the work often means that complaints from the public alleging faulty appraisals require an appraisal expert opinion. To ensure complaints are thoroughly reviewed in a timely manner, the board hires appraisers on a contract basis to review complex complaints. This process continues to work well. The result results in clear and comprehensive complaint summary reports submitted for the board's review in a timely manner. The national influence of our DC Board of Appraisers. The DC Board of Appraisers continues to be successful in maintaining our membership with the Association of Appraisal Regulatory Officials, or ARO. The spring and fall annual conferences bring together top regulator officials from around the country and keep the board abreast of key developments impacting the board's enforcement of federally regulated requirements. regulatory requirements. Last year's spring meeting was held in person in Nashville, Tennessee on May 3rd through 5th, 2024. I am happy to report that the fall conference was held in person in Boston, Massachusetts, October 28th through 30, 2024. The board was well represented in attendance at both meetings. I completed my term as a director of the Aero Board on the Aero Board of Directors, as well as my service as on the executive committee. Although my terms have ended, I remain active with Aero by serving as vice chair of the advisory committee of the Appraisal Qualifications Board, a part of the Appraisal Foundation, and as a member of the program committee for Aero. Mr. Lewis, DLCP program manager, was reelected to the Aero Board of Directors. That was actually last October. The board continues to move toward expanding its educational offerings through public-private partnerships with numerous local agencies and private organizations. During fiscal year 2024, the board sponsored 2 historic preservation seminars in person for all licensed appraisers with the DC Preservation League and the DC Real Estate Commission. The board also sponsored the 7-hour Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice during December of 2023. Additionally, the board will sponsor this spring the 7-hour in-person Evaluation, Bias, and Fair Housing Laws and Regulation course for all appraiser licensees. Proposed and final rulemaking will require that this course will need to be completed by all new and renewing appraiser licensees effective January 1, 2026. These seminars represent a continuing effort by the board to ensure our licensees are knowledgeable about the historic districts and disclosure requirements, as well as fair housing laws and regulation. We will continue to maintain rigorous continuing education requirements for our licensees and offer board-sponsored courses for its licensing annually. The board has continued the process of assisting our trainees in making sure that their work product and logs are completed correctly, and to help them avoid any rejections by the appraisal board. This is done for the trainee and supervisor without any penalty and is meant as a learning tool. Our initiatives. In fiscal year 2024, the board will continue to work with the Department of Insurance, Securities, and Banking, DISB, on bias in the, oops, I'm over time. Should I keep going? Okay, thank you.
You're good.
On bias in the appraisal process. Although the board has neither received any complaints nor is it aware of any evidence of bias in appraisal process, we remain vigilant in wanting to ensure equity and fairness in the industry. Board Chair Tamara Pappas, it's myself, participated in the Summer Youth Outreach Program. In conclusion, the board members consider our role a great opportunity to serve the citizens of the District of Columbia. We will continue to carry out the board's many responsibilities, including establishing high standards for pre-licensing and continuing education, investing consumer complaints, penalizing bad actors, complying with federal requirements, and engaging with federal regulatory organizations across the nation. The board thanks Mayor Bowser, DLCP, and this committee for your leadership and support. We appreciate the opportunity to share our accomplishments and plans for continuous important and look forward improvement. Sorry, I knew something wasn't right there. And look forward to continuing the work with the committee. This concludes my testimony. I welcome any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And Ed Downs, Chair of the Real Estate Commission.
Excuse me. Good morning, Chairperson White and members of the staff of the Committee on Housing. I'm Edward Downs, Chairperson of the District of Columbia Real Estate Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of Mayor Muriel Bowser at today's hearing to discuss the activities and accomplishments of the Commission in fiscal year 2024 to the present. I am currently serving in my first year as chairperson of the commission after being elected on January 14th, 2025. I'm excited for the opportunity to serve on the commission and in this capacity. Our mission is to protect the public health, safety, and welfare of district residents by assuring that licensed persons engaged in the practice of real estate transactions, as well as applicants seeking to engage in the practice of real estate, have the specialized skills and the necessary training required to perform the real estate services governed by the commission. I am pleased to be able to work with an engaged group of fellow commission members, as well as the dedicated, was that a signal?
It was me hitting a button. I didn't even know it was here. Sorry.
Yep, okay. There are no mistakes. I'm pleased to be able to work with an engaged group of fellow commission members, as well as the dedicated Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection staff and legal counsel. The commission consists of 9 members, including 3 real estate brokers, 2 property managers, 2 salespersons, 1 attorney, and 1 consumer member. Each real estate broker, salesperson, and property manager member must be licensed in the district. The attorney member must be engaged in the practice of real estate law. All members of the commission are required to be residents of the District of Columbia. The mayor, with the consent of the council, appoints each member of the commission who serves a maximum of 3 full consecutive 3-year terms. The commission meets every second Tuesday of each month at 10 a.m. except for August. The current commissioner members are Ed Downs, chair, broker member; Elizabeth Blakesley, vice chair, broker member; Monique Owens, property manager member; Erica Black, salesperson member; and Patrice Richardson, consumer member. We currently have 4 vacancies, including a real estate broker, a real estate salesperson, a property manager, and an attorney. We're actively seeking to fill those positions as soon as possible. The commission is responsible for determining initial eligibility and renewal licensure requirements, establishing and monitoring compliance with continuing education requirements, continually monitoring standards for the professions involved in real estate transactions, and recommending changes as needed, along with receiving and resolving complaints against licensed real estate professionals. Further, the commission remains vigilant in our oversight of the Real Estate Guarantee and Education Fund. Since last year's performance oversight hearing on February 8th, 2024, the commission has successfully held all scheduled monthly meetings utilizing the Cisco WebEx platform and is now using the Zoom platform. These platforms conveniently allow the public to virtually attend and participate. While a need for social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic was accommodated by the virtual meeting format, the commission continues to receive positive feedback from the licensees and the members of the public on the virtual delivery method of its meetings over the past 4 years. Thus, the commission decided to continue to hold its meetings virtually, or at least hybrid, to allow for greater public participation. Excuse me. In fiscal year 24, several commissioners attended the Association of Real Estate License Law Officials, also known as ARELO, trainings pertaining to the administration of license law, promulgation of regulations, and enforcement practices. Attendance at ARELO trainings also allows commission members, and staff an opportunity to participate in leadership opportunities on a national level. Currently, I serve on the ARELO Board of Directors. I am also serving as co-chair of ARELO's Law and Regulation Committee. Our board administrator serves on the Arello Fair Housing Committee, and our program manager serves as a trustee of the Arello Foundation. Serving in these positions provides DC with national recognition for its education and enforcement activities. The commission is currently in the renewal period for real estate brokers, property managers, and real estate organization licensees. The renewal process for the real estate salespersons begins June 1, 2025. In the past renewal cycle, we had 15,671 licensees renew. Additionally, during the last council period, the commission, in conjunction with the DLCP, submitted written testimony on the Licensing for Accountability of Management of Properties, or the LAMP Amendment Act of 2023, which provides for the licensure of property management companies. Also, the commission has participated in discussions on the topic of real estate wholesaling to protect homeowners in the District of Columbia. As far as educational programs, the commission continues to expand its educational offerings through public-private partnerships with local agencies and private organizations. During fiscal year 24, the commission and DLCP offered virtual and in-person courses on DC legislative updates, DC fair housing, DC ethics, broker supervision, and property management in the district. The commission, in conjunction with DLCP, the Board of Real Estate Appraisers, and the DC Historic Preservation League, also sponsored a series of in-person seminars on historic preservation in the summer of last year. To remain current with fair housing laws and regulations, the commission sponsored 2 in-person fair housing instructor development workshops at the Martin Luther King Memorial Library. These course offerings sought to ensure all education providers are updated on teaching methodologies for delivering the material to all licensees. In terms of compliance with Occupations and Professions Licensure Act of 1998, the commission continues to enforce the Occupations and Professions Licensure Act of 1998 by receiving and reviewing complaints from members of the public. In fiscal year 2024, DLCP modified how commission complaints are received and processed. The process was changed in an effort to ensure complaints are thoroughly investigated by DLCP's Consumer Protection Unit before they're referred to boards and commissions for review. In fiscal year 24, the commission received a total of 64 complaints, in which 2 resulted in disciplinary actions taken against a licensee. In fiscal year 25 to date, the commission has received 19 complaints. The commission values transparency and publishes newsletters regularly, as well as consumer alerts that the public and licensees can view online on the commission's website under Publications and Resources. Newsletters include disciplinary actions taken against licensees by the commission, as well as articles for educational purposes and regulatory requirements. In conclusion, the commission will continue to dutifully carry out the responsibility of protecting the public interest and welfare by upholding the letter and spirit of the district's licensure law concerning real estate brokers and salespersons, as well as property managers. The commission appreciates the opportunity to share its accomplishments and plans for the future, and looks forward to continuing work with Mayor Bowser, DLCP, and the committee. Thank you for your leadership and support. This concludes my testimony, and I welcome any questions the committee may have.
Excellent. Well, thank you both again for being with us today and for the work that you and your colleagues are doing. Let me start with questions for Bria in particular. Let me start with the complaint process and enforcement. Can you run through the nature of the complaints that you get?
Mostly it's they don't like the value, or they, it didn't make value. Sometimes that's it. We've had a few where they'll have one and then they'll have another one and they differ in the appraisal process. And that might be for many different reasons. Sometimes it's for lending, sometimes it's for other issues that they might request an appraisal. So for the most part, that's what it is. Now Fannie Mae just recently, was it last couple years, Leon? Yeah, last couple years, they're feeding everything into a computer. And if there's something that too many inconsistencies in the report or something like that, they started sending us what they called, what was it they called it? It wasn't a complaint. It was like a flag, take a look at this. So initially we were like, what do we do with this? It's not a complaint. They're not actually identifying something. We're still reaching out because the appraiser also would have gotten a letter from them saying, we are finding too many inconsistencies, how you're reporting either quality or condition of it. Doesn't seem, we're looking at these pictures. I mean, so it's like an AI thing. They're starting to analyze and keeping track of and looking for things that flag. And so finally what we did was we started having these people send in their work file and take a look at it. But it was really hard because it wasn't an official complaint.
Right. So this is Fannie taking a look themselves.
And Freddie,
And Freddie,
yeah,
okay.
when the GSE, when they get them all.
Yes.
And now they're literally, in fact, I know an appraiser friend of mine who works for Freddie, is they literally are inputting everything about these appraisals. So it's.
And how does the board determine, so you had, I think it was 18 complaints last fiscal year.
Right.
2 resulted in disciplinary action.
Right.
How does the board determine which complaints warrant disciplinary action?
Well, our process, now it's shifted a little bit. It's going through, what is it?
DLCP. Yes.
And then it gets sent to us. So it's got like a filtering. But it used to be they would just send in the complaint to us and we would receive it directly. We request the entire work file from and we acknowledge to the appraiser that we've received this and ask them to respond to it, to explain, about the complaint and all of their pieces. And once we get all of that data and material, the board will review it. We'll read the complaint, try to determine if there's, if it's a valid complaint. It may just be, I didn't like the way they looked, or they didn't talk to me the way I thought they should. And yeah, I mean, they're all important. But we don't do the judgment. We do a cursory review. We read all the reports and we're like, ooh, and we send it to, we have a contract appraiser who's been in the business 40 years, is excellent. He works with the Appraisal Institute. He's very, very well qualified. And he does what's called a USPAP review. So we aren't reviewing.
What's that review?
I'm sorry, USPAP, that US, Uniform Standards of.
Okay, so they
Professional.
re-review it for like
They
accuracy.
really go through it.
Okay.
Yeah, because that is our standard. USPAP that is what comes down from the appraisal subcommittee and the foundation This is the guideline. Universally, all appraisers must abide by these standards. And the reviewer is specialized in that, and he will go through there. And that's, we don't do value. We're not doing a value opinion. But we do want to review that the process was done correctly. And like I said, we only had a couple where it was just egregious, and they really need to, we have a matrix for discipline
Mhm.
that comes from the foundation, the Appraisal Foundation, that rates the level, sort of, the errors. If there's so many errors that the report cannot be determined to be credible,
Mhm.
because there's just too many fundamental errors in this, in the
What if the
standards.
nature of the complaint is different? Like, let's say the person showed up and they like were intoxicated or something. So it's not about the evaluation.
We haven't gotten any of those.
Thank goodness. Hopefully it won't.
goodness. We just haven't had any of those. We really would need to talk to that person and find out what the issue is. Let's
I
say,
guess what I'm asking is,
if it was
if
a personal appearance.
yeah, if the complaint was about something other than the specific valuation, how would that be handled? Or do you get any of those?
We haven't.
Okay.
Do you have any history of that, Leon?
You can come up.
Yeah.
I'm going to swear you in very quickly. There we are.
Have a seat. We got the man who's been, well, I don't know. Yeah, actually, we came on about the
Let
same
me ask you,
time.
raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to provide to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you so much. If you would turn on your mic and introduce yourself for the record, I appreciate you.
Yeah, I'm Leon Lewis, and I manage the appraisal program and the real estate program.
Excellent. So if I'm trying to understand the complaint process, if there's a complaint that doesn't have to do with the valuation, but something about treatment,
Professionalism.
there we are. How are those handled?
I've been working with this board for many years, and the only one that I can remember the board receiving was a case where the appraiser, the person had paid for an appraiser, and the person didn't actually perform the responsibilities of which he was contracted for.
Okay.
And that went to then the investigation division, and the complaint was reviewed, and it came back to the board, and that person's license was revoked. That was many years ago.
Yeah,
But other than that, when, most of them have been, as the chairperson has said, usually potential use violations.
Okay. And what like percentage of complaints, or how do you determine whether a complaint is dismissed without investigation, or if you do an investigation?
We have a few where someone just complains and the board doesn't see any use violations, and but I would say 70 to 80% of the complaints are sent to our review appraiser. Most of them are, I would even go up to say 80 to 90%, but there are some where the board just doesn't, and they're the experts in this area, where they just don't see any violations and, consider it, a moot issue in terms of sending it to a review appraiser.
Okay. And does the board proactively audit appraisers for compliance, or does it rely on consumer complaints?
Primarily consumer complaints.
Okay.
Yeah, we really don't have access to proactively, we don't see their work, their work file. I mean, there's hundreds that
there's a
go
lot,
on
yeah.
all the time. So we don't have any access to that. Like I said, with the Fannie Mae complaints,
Mhm.
that's probably the one where they're sort of flagging, going, maybe you need to have a conversation with this person. And we have had some, and we're really about education when it comes to that type of thing. When we see someone is just, maybe they're getting several of these complaints, there's something lacking in their educational or knowledge about
Mhm.
something. Maybe they were appraising something that they really weren't as knowledgeable in, and USPAP says if you do not have the knowledge, get it.
Right. Let me move to the board's priorities, and I'm not going to ask about all of them. Just like a couple questions on
Sure.
your top 5 priorities for fiscal year 25, our current fiscal year. The first one is to conduct an education course on historic preservation, valuation bias, and fair housing laws and regulations. Are you planning for one course on all 3 or 3 separate courses?
Well, the historic is ongoing. We do that twice a year, every year
Okay.
in conjunction with Preservation Board and the
Mhm.
commission. The valuation and bias is brand new for us.
Mhm.
And it just came down, mandated from the Appraisal Foundation, that this course must be completed. Now, all appraisers, if you're licensed, you take a 7-hour course. If you are not licensed yet, it will be included in your qualifying education and you will need an exam hour, so 8 hours. Then once you've completed that and we hit January 1, our renewal cycle is in February.
Mhm.
So everyone will have had to have that. So we have put our legislature group together, our attorney, and they have developed the regulation, submitted it. It's about to be published. So we're really in good shape there. We found some instructors that have also had to kind of rush out and get fully on this
Yeah.
whole new program. And so we're scheduling that for the spring. Now, it will then become a 4-hour renewal course, is similar to the 7-hour USPAP course. They're mandated. You can have lots of other things, electives, but these 2 courses will be required every 2-year cycle. And once you've taken the 7-hour, it will then be reduced to a 4-hour. So this is very new for us. Obviously, in USPAP, there's a whole ethics section. You can't have bias, period.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, you can't
I'm excited.
do it.
We've been talking about this for some years. I'm glad this is being recognized
Yeah.
nationally. The other priority I want to just ask a question about, the second one, to continue to be active and attend conferences with the Association of Appraiser Regulatory Officials.
Yes.
Conferences kind of run the gamut on productivity. Why is this a priority?
Well, first of all, we are meeting with other regulators from all across the United States. Every jurisdiction is automatically a member of ARO. So they have access to what we have. Now, there is a price to go, obviously, but we don't just hang out. There's always a course to attend, a productive course of something new. And then we hear from all the governmental entities so that we are abreast of all the changes and everything that's going on. We find out how we did, whether we got rated on when they did our review. Right now, we're good standing, so yay. We're not excellent yet, though, so we're working on that. I work on the program committee for ARO, and then for the foundation, like I said, I'm the vice chair of the qualifications board. So we work with all those courses, but we get the questions, we hear the problems that they're having. How do you solve these things? What do you do? So we find it. We don't attend a lot of other things like that. I mean, I attend all kinds of courses for myself, but for ARO, we find it's only 3 days. We find it to be a very rewarding.
Okay. And on the topic of bias in audits, I think most of us assume we have much less bias than we do. It's just human nature.
Yes.
Do you know, particularly from attending conferences or talking to colleagues across the nation, whether any jurisdictions have done independent bias audits to understand if there is sort of a baseline issue?
Trying to picture what you're asking, a bias audit.
So what I'm saying is, I believe that the racial bias exists in appraisals, and I think a lot of people share this view, not everyone. It is either happening or it's not happening, and if it is happening, it's happening to some small degree or to some great degree. It would seem beneficial to us to understand through an independent audit, because if I'm attending a class on racial bias and I have no information about whether or not this is happening, and I assume that I don't, see it, then, maybe I approach it one way. But if there's an independent bias audit that brings data at the beginning of this class that says, here's the financial impact of bias in appraisals in the District of Columbia, I might digest the information or the need for the information differently.
Right. How do you perceive that would look? What would that look like? I'm trying to understand how would that, how do you look at that? I'm trying to,
I'm sure there are people more experienced than me that
but I mean,
could
where would they
answer
get the
that.
information and data?
You know a lot more about this than I do, but this seems like a pretty easily solvable problem. I think the information and data exists, and again, it either happens or it doesn't.
Right.
If bias is not, racial bias is not an issue, it'd be helpful for us to know it.
Right.
If it is an issue, it'd be helpful for us to know it. So I don't see the harm.
Right. No.
The how is
I'm just
probably
trying to
easier.
picture the process in my brain. One thing I do know for the district is I don't think any of our appraisers are intentionally biased, and I'm sure that there are some. They're everywhere. They're all over. Is we have a historic, and I'm seeing it change, have a historic built-in neighborhood bias, where you'll go to a neighborhood, and I see it much less now, and it's like automatically all these homes are worth less in this neighborhood than in this neighborhood, even if you took the exact same house and put it one place or the other. And that's based on the sales prices, because that's all we see. That's how we do our comparables. Okay, here's the identical house. 2 blocks down, it sold for this. We've got one over here, it sold for that. We got one over here, and we reconcile those differences as compared to our subject property. What I'm seeing now with all the new projects that have been built, let's say a reservoir district reservoir going on. In some of the other Ward 7, Ward 8, we're getting new townhouses, new complexes being built, and the prices are coming up. They're selling for more.
So
Their
I guess
value
what
higher.
I understand everything you're saying. We've spoke about this for a couple of years.
Right.
In that time, it seems like the national board has weighed in and said there's enough of an issue that we think we should require a class.
Right.
So I know I'm not on an island here.
Right.
And again, I think rather than insisting that there is a problem or is not a problem, it's better to be led by data. Data is gettable here.
I
and so
understand that.
we'll work together to figure out what that might look like.
And there's one other thing I wanted to say is these classes that we're getting, and we've been getting them at Aero, as the regulators have been going in, they're actually teaching people what bias is, that you are, by words you use, that you're unintentionally putting in a bias that shouldn't be there. Yeah, our descriptors, how you describe something. This is a high-end, expensive neighborhood. It's, desirable, these kind of words. And we're trying to teach our appraisers how to think differently. And
That's
to,
excellent.
to see the sticks and bricks.
I
that-
appreciate that you all did you all went to at least one school, which I think is really helpful to start to expose
That was really fun.
folks. I'm sure it was, and I'm positive that there were some number of students who left there, thinking about a career option that they didn't, hadn't thought about before.
Hadn't even,
And
absolutely.
that is so beneficial. With the I don't think the board does not collect demographic data on appraisers, do you?
No.
So I guess I'm left only with my observations of the field, which it seems underrepresented by minorities and perhaps women. Are there steps the board can take to, do what you all really started doing in the school to start to open up a pipeline? Because again, if I have appraisers in my family, I might think of that as a career, but if I don't, then I won't.
Right.
And so I think the divide can naturally grow.
And that's been the nature of appraising. It was a family business, and the son or daughter became, and then, and so on and so forth. So it stayed in that lineage, but we're hoping to, and we're reaching out. And I'm actually seeing, when I go to meetings, a lot more diversity, a lot more women, a lot more persons of other ethnicities. And we're chipping away at it. It's a national problem.
Yeah.
It's not just a District of Columbia.
Yeah.
And
How are we chipping away at it? I'm glad that's happening. Why is that happening?
well, there are more outreach. And I did tell you about the Mississippi project and how they took it on. We haven't really been able to figure out how to do that yet, but it has just shifted. We have a new generation of people coming in. And even when I attend meetings, it's much more diverse than when I first started.
But based on your observation, do you think it will continue to the field will continue to diversify sufficiently on its own, or is this something that we need to pay some particular attention to?
Well, yeah, I think we always need to pay attention.
What would that look like?
And I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It really just, I think too, when we have more diverse people and they go into homes, the children in those homes see a different profession of maybe a person that looks like them. So our whole country is becoming much more diverse. And yeah, I'm all for it. Wherever I can help, wherever I can pitch in, figure it out, I'd be more than glad to.
Right. So it sounds like things are moving in the right direction, but it warrants some attention, and we can talk about what that
Sure.
might look like.
Yeah.
This might be my last question. I'm getting close to it. For the board meetings, do members of the public get to speak at the board meetings?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
on the agenda. It's like the second, I gavel in.
Yes.
And then members of the public, and if they come in after that, we acknowledge them and ask them if they have any questions. Yeah, and we always invite the new appraisers, the trainees to, come and be part, and understand better what's going on. We are still missing a consumer member. It's been 2 2 years now. I
2
just,
years now. I was gonna ask that.
maybe longer.
Okay, let us check in with the Office of Talent and Appointments on that because
Yeah.
we do want a full complement.
I keep sending people over, but unfortunately they have a little bit of a background in in appraising or housing, and they're like, no, we already have enough of those. You know, so I'm particularly looking for a female of color.
I love
That's
it.
my personal goal. I
I've-
just give a better balance.
I love it. I love it. Well, we'll work with you in the board on that, and I appreciate your attention.
Poor Leon.
One last question, actually, the complaint process.
Yes.
What's the timeline for that? How long does it take?
Well, mandatory, it has to be done within 12 months.
Okay.
So complete that is the appraisal subcommittee. Like I said, we're hard rules. It all depends. It depends. First of all, we get the complaint. We have to ask for, everything from the appraiser, and they're generally very good. And we're in contact with them. Sometimes we ask them to come into our executive session so we can speak to them privately. If we have questions that we need to ask about it.
I was going to add to it that most of the complaints, when there's a disciplinary action, they're pretty much settled via consent orders,
Okay.
where we don't have to send it over to the Office of Administrative Hearings for a hearing, which takes longer. But usually the committee, the appraisal subcommittee, and we have one coming up in March.
Yeah.
So they're going to look at every complaint that the board has received, and they're going to look at the timeline in terms of resolution. So generally, they want everything completed within 1 year. That's usually their timetable. But with the board, this board having expedited the process via consent orders, whether the complaint ends up in a suspension, revocation, even though the board didn't have any this past period, they had one suspension. And I believe that one came through initially Fannie Mae,
Right.
where this appraiser had actually committed violations in other jurisdictions. But usually that complaint was settled via consent order, where it was a suspension as well as a fine.
Consent order comes from
The board.
Okay.
Us.
The
Yeah.
board issues the consent order.
Okay.
Our legal counsel prepares it, and they'll put everything in that order. And then
If
usually those will end up in fines, corrective education. that the
Yes, we
board
have a whole
imposes. Yeah,
category of corrective
Yeah.
education.
right. And then they
Our
use the
goal is to
matrix.
really educate our appraisers.
if the appraiser disagrees with the
Mhm.
consent order,
Mhm.
what are their options?
Well, if they disagree, they may come to the board and speak to the board during its executive session to
Right.
post things that the board may have overlooked, or just express their opinion about the consent order that was issued. The board may consider their information, if you will,
Mhm.
and they may reduce the fine, or they may reduce it from being a revocation or suspension to a lower type fine. But we have had some, not many. The board has had some that were challenged.
Okay.
So that happens, but the whole thing, and this is not to interfere with the process, but to make sure that the board acts in compliance and that the decision that they issue is fair
Okay.
for the public.
Now, Ed Downs is feeling neglected over here, so I want to make sure we get some questions to.
I'm fine. My mic was turned off once already. I'm happy to leave it off.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So,
He's fine with.
Mr. Dowd, first and foremost, welcome. You're relatively new to the role.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so I appreciate it. Let me start with the commission's top priorities. The first is performing comprehensive review of current legislation and regulations to ensure they comply with real estate practices in the district. What's your timeline for that?
I would say that's ongoing. We have not established a formal review process timeline
Okay.
chart yet. but that's,
Okay. All right, we will, we'll jump on you if we are, at the hearing next year.
Sure.
And this is still on the to-do list, but,
It's a deal.
You get excellent. The draft, rulemaking that revises the seller disclosure statement, for, real property consisting of 1 to 4 dwelling units. Why is this a priority? I just don't understand it, so.
Because it's never ending. This is something that I thought could be easily dispensed with, and I don't know, Leon can chip in with more exact dates, but there were some issues that we wanted to have added to the disclosure, the mandatory disclosure. The Realtors Association wanted to work with us. They did to a certain extent. Somehow we got off track. Leon, can you give me the background on how and why this never got finalized? I'm trying to figure it out.
I know there have been several meetings on the disclosure form. The seller disclosure form was implemented about 20 years ago. Okay. And since that time, that was in the late 90s. And then somewhere around maybe 7, 8 years, they brought in, there was an amendment concerning historic properties, which was not being disclosed. So they added that about 10, 15 years ago. So I think it's just a matter of presently going through the seller disclosure process and seeing what needs to be added that is not there. And we're talking about 10 or 15 years. So it's just a review of what's there and to possibly add to it. The technicality of it, I'm not, able to get into, but I think that's the whole process, is just to review it and update it.
And this is only for a real property consisting of 1 to 4 dwelling units, right? What I missed this. What's the difference between that and other, I guess, larger properties? What's not disclosed that should be disclosed?
Oh, boy. Well, I think that the thinking is that if you're buying a larger property, you might be more well-informed than the individual consumer buying a single-family house.
Okay.
The property disclosure is typically focused on townhouses or single-family houses. And so they'll ask questions like, does standing water sit in the lot for more than 10 days after a rainstorm? And I think that when you get up into more than 4 units,
I see.
a developer or a buyer is going to be more sophisticated. I mean, that's how I've always interpreted it.
I see. Okay, that makes a lot more sense to me now. And for this draft rulemaking for the required education core courses for all licensees and for the Fair Housing Instructor Development Workshop, it's similar to the other. You don't have a timeline for those yet, but anticipate doing those this fiscal year.
Where are you looking at draft rulemaking for those?
He's talking about the core classes. All of those are gonna be held this year.
Yeah.
And we have a partnership with the Martin Luther King Memorial Library starting last year. So as last year, we started doing in-person classes again. We hadn't done those in several years. So that's going to be a repeat because the renewal is coming up we're currently going through the broker and property manager and real estate organization renewal, but the sales agents are coming up this summer. And we have about 10,000 sales agents. So the commission tries to implement those courses so we can make sure that the licensees will meet the requirements.
Okay.
So all those they're going to be held in person and they're also going to be held virtually.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. But to my knowledge, there's no draft rulemaking planned on relative to those things.
Okay.
That's just what we do as a matter of routine.
Okay. The rulemaking was with respect to the real properties of 1 to 4 dwelling units. You do plan to do a rulemaking there?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Yes.
So on the license renewals, I don't know if there's a typo in your pre-hearing responses, in my notes, or in your testimony, but I want to understand those. The number of brokers, it looked like in my review of what you submitted, there was a substantial reduction in the number of brokers. Is that
Oh.
right or no?
Are you looking at
I-
a chart which may have been provided to you?
I cannot even remember where the numbers came
Okay,
from at this
okay,
point.
I-
Now, just in my
I'm
notes.
trying to wonder whether they refer to the renewals, because we're currently in the renewal process where they're
Renewals,
currently
that's right.
renewing.
Yeah.
So you probably will see that small number, but because we just started renewals in
I see.
December.
Okay,
So that's gonna go for, through February, and then we give a 2-month late filing period. So
okay.
we just
So
started with it, so that's why the
nothing
numbers are low.
drastic you're seeing at this point.
Right.
Yeah, and also in preparation, I requested those numbers.
Yeah.
And I realized that the report I got refers to fiscal years. And of course, we renew according to calendar years. So you're going to have
I'd say,
completely out of sync. And then you've got brokers renewing in odd number of years, and we've just started.
I see.
So,
Okay,
we do not have a precipitous drop of the number of brokers.
okay, excellent, excellent. The numbers I was looking at were startling, so I feel a lot better now. The complaint processing and consumer protection aspect of your work. What's the complaint process for you all at the Real Estate Commission?
Well, I think somewhat similar to what you heard from the appraisers. We now have our complaints kind of pre-vetted almost by DLCP. So we are dealing with a greater likelihood of real complaints. We get those complaints and we take the material that we may have received with them and we read through them and we chart them. And then at every commission meeting, we go through them. We rely heavily on our legal counsel to remind us of what is possible and what is not possible and what is preposterous. Sometimes the complaint process is streamlined because it'll be absolutely clear that something is without merit, or it'll be absolutely clear that somebody was really wrong, And it's the ones that are in the gray area in between where the processing time is going to be longest, where the commission will at times have to request more information, which means another month is added on to that complaint. Or someone doesn't like what they have been presented in terms of a consent order, and they will appeal that, or they will come to a subsequent commission meeting to weigh in on it informally, essentially. So the complaint process is getting very streamlined. Our attorney that we're working with now is excellent in giving us a summary, very concisely what their take is, so that as commissioners, we will get the roster of complaints Friday before the next meeting next week. And so we will see what our legal counsel thinks about it as we read through it as licensees.
Yeah. I mean, certainly don't want any more disciplinary actions taken than necessary. But it strikes me out of 64 complaints last, I think, fiscal year, there were 2 disciplinary actions taken. It's a pretty low percentage. Again, if that's what it is, then that's all right. But why such a low percentage?
Well, that's a good question. Leon, Mr. Lewis, when we say disciplinary actions, are we including all the consent orders that we sent out?
Well, a lot of the commission's work, even though the complaints are there, and that's a major part of the commission's work. But here lately, probably the last 2 to 3 years, for some reason, a lot of the commission's work is focused on licensees who have practiced after expiration. And then they come back, they reinstate, and there's a question on the application that asks, have you been practicing? Well, most times they'll answer honestly. So a lot of the commission's work over this past year, for some reason, has been in the disciplinary action concerning reinstated licenses.
Do those arrive from complaints, or is that something else if the license.
It comes from the reinstatement application where they indicated they've practiced.
So it's possible that the 2 disciplinary actions didn't come from complaints.
They did come from
They did,
complaints.
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they do a thorough review, you know, the complaints come from the Consumer Protection Unit, and then the legal counsel will review it, you know, prepare a report for the commission, and then they review it. And if the actions are there for enforcement of a violation, the commission does take action. The commission does have a very good education program in its core classes of legislative update and things that they should be aware of. So, and this commission is over the years, fair housing, et cetera, they have been very diligent and out front in those areas,
Okay.
probably more than any other commission in the country. I mean, if you were to go to an Arello meeting and some of the things that come out where people are not just educated on fair housing in some states, if you will. And if you look at the District of Columbia, we've had fair housing requirements since the 1980s. So they've done a very good job in educating the licensees.
I would just jump on that too, and that is that a lot of times, even though the complaints we receive are vetted in advance, we have to find something pertaining to the license law in order to discipline someone. So a lot of times we are crying into our handkerchiefs over these egregious things, but it's difficult to find something with that narrow focus. And so we would refer somebody to the Office of Tenant Advocate or something like that. So yes, you had a terrible real estate experience and somebody was a real jerk, but in terms of breaking the letter of the law, it's hard for us to bend too much. So a lot of those complaints do get sent elsewhere.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. Let me ask about expanding oversight of property management companies. Right now, individual managers have to be licensed, but not management companies, and this can make it difficult to hold companies accountable for violations. Why is it important to require property management companies, not just the individuals, to be licensed? Or what are we responding to here?
Well, one thing that pops to my mind immediately is that, increasingly, housing is a big corporate event, and so a large company would come in and build a 500-unit building, and they have no clue about how business is done and regulated in the District of Columbia. And so they have their own property managers who do incredibly stupid things, things that are clearly in violation of law. And they can sometimes get away with it because they can say, well, that's my employee. That's not a licensed property manager. So that's where the breakdown comes frequently with accountability. That if somebody is an employee, then they don't have to be licensed to do property management. It's a big problem with outside landlords, if you'll say.
Yeah, which we have a lot of.
Yeah, and that case that was on the screen earlier, I'm thinking, well, we need landlord education. If you're going to self-manage, you have the responsibility to know what the laws are.
So the LAMP Act, Licensing for Accountability of Management of Properties Act, I think this needs to be reintroduced. Is that right? Okay. And in your view, how would it improve consumer protections?
I think tenants would have a better experience.
Yeah.
There would be accountability
Yeah.
established.
Because of the liability of the company.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me move to the real estate wholesaling and market manipulation. If you would help with a definition first, real estate wholesaling, what is that?
Well, I think in the simplest terms, it's when someone acquires a contract interest in a property, they don't record it, and then they turn around and sell it
Hmm.
for a higher price. And it's the whole mechanism is designed to take advantage of sellers who are not sophisticated, that may think that their property is worth much less than it really is worth. That
Is this like folks who are buying apartment buildings, particularly more distressed buildings, people who are soliciting homeowners to sell their homes for, cash, or all of the above?
all of the above, but mostly, what we're concerned about getting some regulations in place about is the individual consumer, the individual seller,
Okay.
the unsophisticated,
Mm.
someone's grandma who is completely out of touch with what
Yeah. It
is
can be
what.
very predatory to
Exactly.
vulnerable populations.
I
Exactly.
think it could concern the elderly also,
Yes,
Yeah.
who may be in need of money
yes.
and they want money right away and someone can come in with a quick sale,
Yeah.
Any vulnerable,
give them whatever and then sell it later on and make a much
Yeah.
higher profit on the
I
property.
see.
any vulnerable population. Yeah.
And does this have to be done through law, or can it be done through regulation?
Through law.
Okay. And are there examples from other jurisdictions that you would point to at this time?
There's some states we found out at our RELO meetings, like Oklahoma. I think Illinois has one. North Dakota has some legislation in place.
Okay,
Just recently, though.
Yeah, we're just starting to see
Yeah.
examples.
excellent.
And that's one of the things about Arello that's so invaluable, that we've got that.
Excellent. I
Yeah.
appreciate that this is on your radar. We have an increasingly aging population. A lot of our elderly residents have lived in their homes for quite some time, and as we all know, the costs and values have gone up substantially over the past couple of decades. So there's a lot of room to take advantage of residents there. Really
Yeah.
appreciate your focus on that.
Councilman White?
Yes.
I wanted to make a comment regarding the disclosures. That's invaluable for the appraiser. I mean, that's very
makes
important.
sense.
We have to review that contract, and we need to know everything about it. And I might commend, and for the most part, a historically designated home that has a historic preservation on it, it's not necessarily going to impact the value, but what does impact
Mhm.
is I have to educate these new buyers and go, well, I just want you to know, don't paint your door, don't change anything on the outside of your home. You can't touch it. What do you mean? I'm like, what do you mean? They didn't tell you this? And that they probably can do that, but they need to ask the preservation board if they can do that.
Yes.
And there's just this lack of education. I see it less now, but disclosure is just very important.
That's a good
And it
point.
comes all around. We're
Yes.
partners without being partners.
We're all in this together.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah, and yeah.
good point. I appreciate you adding that. The REC does not collect demographic data on real estate professionals. Is that right?
That is correct.
All
Yes.
right. So we don't know whether racial disparities exist in licensing, hiring, or disciplinary actions. Why does REC not collect demographic data on licensees?
Well, how about that? I think historically we haven't. I suspect that probably resources don't lend themselves to us doing that. What I would say about the demographics of licensees is that I think that we in the District of Columbia are leading by example, in terms of diversity, because I know that that's always an issue. If I were to take you on a Sunday open house tour of 20 properties, I would probably introduce you to a cross-section of humanity in terms of the agents holding those open houses. It's been, getting a real estate license in some ways is very easy to do. And so, you know, becoming a realtor is really a path to upward mobility for a lot of people. And there are many agents of yellow, black, what's this old childhood song? Yellow, red, and black and white. You know, of every stripe who maybe have only been in this country for 10 years or less.
Yeah.
And it's in the district, it's in the general district area. When I go to Arello conferences, I see more of the stereotypical demographic for real estate. So that's the long-winded answer to your question. I think we're doing pretty good in terms of having a great mix of people. We did attend the same summer youth education seminar.
Excellent.
And we will continue to do outreach like that. I think just because we're doing good doesn't mean we don't have to do outreach.
Sure.
But that's the kind of thing that we're aware of.
I appreciate it. I hope you will continue doing outreach. It matters. Let me ask about and I'm starting to wind down here, so not too many more questions. Let me ask about the board members. One, I think in your testimony you said you have 4 vacancies.
Yes, that was sort of like the intersection of many events. You know, we had one person that had to drop off. We had one person who moved out of the District of Columbia and had to drop off. We had one person that rolled off, termed out. We had another person who just didn't want to be confirmed.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
So these haven't been very long-standing, not years long.
no.
Okay.
No, we had a full complement until just recently.
Okay.
And those of us who constitute a quorum, the 5 of us remaining, are sort of constantly in touch with each other about who would be a good candidate, who would the mayor be interested in. It's ultimately up to the mayor, but you know, I've been in this field for 34 years, so I kind of know who the players are and who might be competent.
Okay.
But the trick is obviously finding somebody who's knowledgeable, but who's also interested in serving and is able to commit to the time.
Yes.
You know, so.
Okay. That makes sense. And most of the members have good attendance records. Most of them have very good attendance records. A couple somewhat concerning, but one of them is no longer on the commission.
Peer pressure. I mean, we have a culture of.
I appreciate that.
No, I mean, it was, you know.
The real estate guarantee and education fund in FY24, you all spent just shy of $99,000. What was that for?
Well, we did put on our education events that we talked about, where we offer we offer one set of the continuing education courses that are required.
Okay.
And that's for free. And so we're paying for that, the venue and the instructors and everything there. And then also Arello related activities. That's our only real pipeline of almost niche information. And so, you know, attending conferences and also attending things online and participating with Arello is kind of a lifeline for us. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank all 3 of you for being with us today. Mr. Brown, I don't know if you, I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis, I don't know if you expected to offer so much testimony, but I appreciate
I didn't expect to offer any.
your participation and expertise.
I fully expected him to offer.
Oh my God.
I think some of my team members did too.
All the answers.
There we are.
I just wanted to say that, you know, I'm always open to feedback. So I know that sometimes your staff might tune into our meetings, and please, the door is always open. If you see something in a meeting and you have questions about it, give me a call.
Will do.
That's the way we work.
Yes, indeed. Well, I appreciate it. As you said, we are all in this together, not just you all, but us too. Same goals. So really appreciate you being with us and your service to the district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, I will welcome our final government witness, Chief Tenant Advocate Johanna Shreve of OTA. And yes, thank you very much. You all know the routine. Anyone who is or may be testifying or answering questions. I like it. All right, so I ask everyone to raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide to the Committee on Housing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you all very much. You can begin your testimony, and if you would, in that, introduce your team members who may be answering questions.
I'd be happy to introduce my team first. Thank you for making that suggestion. To my right is Amir Sadeghi, who's our supervisory attorney with our legal branch. Amir has been with me for 15 years. To my left, to the far right, to the far left is Rebecca Berry, who is our financial wizard. And she has been with us off and on for 10 years. And next to me is Joel Cohen, who is our policy director, and Joel has been with me for 17 years. Behind me is Joey Trimboli, who has been with the office. He is our legal counsel in the policy division. And Joey has been with us for 5 years. So this represents a good home group that has been consistent and very vital to the success of the Office of the Tenant Advocate. And then you have me, who's been around for 18 years.
Never heard of you.
Well, thank you, Chairperson White and members of the Committee on Housing, for giving me the opportunity to provide testimony on the performance of the DC Office of the Tenant Advocate during fiscal years 24 and 25 to date. I am Johanna Shreve, the district's Chief Tenant Advocate and Director of the Office of Tenant Advocate. I will begin my testimony by noting my deepening concern about the poor building conditions that too many district tenants are forced to live in. This has been an issue for the agency's intake team ever since we first opened our doors in 2006. And during the past several years, however, this issue has taken on added dimensions. More complaints in particular about building security problems and threats to resident safety. Broken utility systems with complaints about mysterious and exorbitant utility fees. The fact that complaints are now coming from all parts of the district, even more recently constructed and higher rental rate buildings. Chairperson White, I will recall your particular interest in this issue from the time of our first meeting at our office just after you assumed the chairmanship. I have no doubt it will continue to be a mutual priority, and I look forward to continuing the dialogue today and in the coming year. I will now report on the activities and performance of the agency in FY24 as well as 25, and the outlook for each of the agency's programmatic branches. I'll start with our legal branch. In FY24, the legal branch assisted tenants in 7,760 intake cases, including Ask the Director inquiries. In the first quarter of 25, the agency has handled 1,915 intake requests. The top 5 issues were lease issues, housing code violations, evictions, security deposits, and rent increases. In calendar year 24, the branch secured cost savings and settlements on behalf of our clients totaling $282,586. And the financial savings resulted from cases involving partial rent refunds due to circumstances such as rodent infestation, the reversal of unlawful rent increases, negotiated rent buyouts, waived early lease termination fees, and the reversal of additional rent charge where the amount of time that the lease requires for a tenant's notice of intent to vacate is unlawful. Clients commonly receive what is referred to as brief services, where the issue can be addressed in a limited amount of time, or they may receive more time-consuming attorney assistance, such as the drafting of a tenant petition or demand letter to the landlord. Clients may also request legal representation from the agency on the basis of a limited scope representation agreement. Additionally, the branch operates a statutorily mandated online tenant hotline referred to as Ask the Director that responds to all tenant inquiries within 24 hours of the next business day. In September of 2024, an OTA attorney advisor argued before the DC Court of Appeals on behalf of a tenant who the landlord was attempting to evict based on what we believe was an erroneous interpretation of the lifetime tenancy right under the district's rental housing conversion law. We look forward to the court's decision on the landlord's appeal of the DC Superior Court tenant favorable decision that the OTA attorney secured on the tenant's behalf. Looking ahead in our legal branch, we want to discuss that in our furtherance of our statutory mission, the OTA is now in the process of hiring a new litigation attorney to focus on impact litigation in a relevant judicial or administrative forum. The agency is also entering into a new collaboration with the Rental Housing Commission to receive from the commission referrals of pro se tenants who want legal representation. The twofold purpose is to help pro se tenants present stronger cases before the commission and help promote the efficiency of adjudications at the commission. Education and outreach. In FY24, the Education and Outreach Branch connected with 10,085 tenants and others at a total of 497 events. In FY25 to date, the branch has connected with 2,725 tenants and others at a total of 147 events. A copy of the itemized listing of those events was attached to the pre-hearing questions that were submitted to you prior to this hearing. Since FY24, the branch has prioritized exploring new outreach methods in tenant neighborhoods. For example, the branch has partnered with the Department of Human Services to offer regularly scheduled resource tabling at rotating DHS service center locations. We have also made the team available on a weekly basis at the mayor's safe commercial corridor hubs in Anacostia and Chinatown. This allows us to provide a consistent in-person presence in the community to address tenant questions and provide resources. From E&O's senior holiday event with over 1,000 attendees to smaller trainings on TOPA for 2 to 4 tenants, we were able to adapt our training and materials to suit all tenant needs. Through partnerships with community organizations to train their staff and by scheduling reoccurring events in public spaces such as DC libraries, hubs, and service centers, our outreach team has been visible and accessible to tenants everywhere throughout the city. OTA will continue these partnerships in FY25 and establish new partnerships to include regular outreach tabling with the Superior Court Services and Offender Supervision Agency and DC Public Libraries. We will also continue to grow our Tenant Association Peer Mentorship Group, the mission of which is to encourage tenant associations to collaborate with each other to address challenges and accomplish common goals. Additionally, the development of a new training curriculum will be created based on feedback from tenants in these group settings. our administrative branch. In addition to developing, implementing, and monitoring the agency's budget, ensuring that all bills are paid and reconciled, ensuring that personnel matters are addressed in a timely manner, and ensuring the Certified Business Enterprise Program is complied with, the administrative branch is responsible for 4 other key agency activities. Emergency Housing Assistance Program. First, the administrative branch is responsible for administering the OTA Emergency Housing Assistance Program established over a decade ago in the agenda. And in FY24, the program assisted 295 households at a cost of $1,031,384.65. You need to adjust the number that you have in your particular copy of the testimony. And in FY25 to date, the program has assisted 47 households at a cost of $292,193.56. And this is roughly 51% of the FY25 appropriation of $570,000. While this level of expenditure to date may suggest that the agency has no spending pressures within the existing annual appropriation, our experience strongly suggests otherwise. Spikes in housing emergencies are not seasonal, and thus they are unpredictable. But the unpredictable itself could not be more predictable. At no time in the entire history of the program has the expenditure ever stayed within the appropriation. Rather, mid-year supplemental funding has been necessary each and every year. Eviction data. Second, since August of 2018, the agency has served as the repository for eviction data and publishes that data on a weekly basis on its website. Legal service providers and community organizations rely on this publication to identify and assist tenants who are at the highest possible risk of eviction, but given proper legal assistance may be able to avoid that fate. At the end of this testimony, we have included charts to reflect the eviction data of 24 and 25 to date. TOPA notices. The administrative branch is also responsible for receiving copies of any housing provider notice of intent to sell a single-family dwelling. The OTA reviews each notice upon receipt of legal sufficiency and notifies the Department of Housing and Community Development for further action when problems are identified. Upon receipt of a legally sufficient notice, the agency sends a rapid response letter to impacted tenants alerting them of their rights and to the availability of OTA's legal assistance. Our rapid response program. Finally, the OTA also sends rapid response letters to tenants who have received TOPA notices in larger buildings, have been scheduled for an eviction, or are impacted by the filing of a rent control housing provider petition. Our policy branch. This past year, the OTA policy branch continued to engage with government and community partners to promote the interests of district tenants in the context of all 3 branches of government: legislative, regulatory, and judicial. In terms of legislative advocacy, I will start by noting the committee's successful reform efforts late last year on 2 critical and long-standing rent control matters. First, you repeal certificates of assurance once and for all, a landlord-written provision that since 1985 has hamstrung any council effort to expand rent stabilization. I cannot be as enthusiastic, however, about the voluntary agreement reform. Simply put, the VA has done so much damage to the district's stock of affordable rental housing over the years. Mend it, don't end it. Efforts have failed for almost as long as OTA has existed. However, I do understand the committee's position that the Rental Housing Commission's December 2021 regulatory revisions should be given a chance to work, which hasn't happened due to the nearly 4-year moratorium. Given that position, I appreciate the committee's outreach to the OTA and the incorporation of the OTA's recommendations to repeal automatic approval of VAs where all unit level rent levels in the buildings are adjusted by the same percentage, and 2, to clarify the VA's first statutory purpose, Since 1985, that first purpose, both on paper and in practice, has been to establish the rent charged, contributing to unqualified, unjustified, anything goes rent increases all across the district. Under the reform law, that first purpose for the rent control VA will be to establish the reasonable rent charged. I will briefly mention a couple of legislative items that are carried over from FY24. The first is the property management responsibility towards tenants. In the OTA's July 2024 testimony on the licensing accountability for management of properties, the LAMP Act, we expressed strong support for the measure as introduced to tighten the licensing requirement for property managers. In addition, in anticipation of its reintroduction, our foremost recommendation is that the property manager licensing law should enumerate the elemental duties that property managers owe to tenants, not just to owners. This is precisely what model ethical codes issued by multinational property management associations suggest. Reducing threats to residents, physical safety in apartment buildings. As we said in our written testimony submitted to the Committee of the Whole and the Committee on Judiciary and Public Safety, I strongly support the OAG's secure apartments for everyone. Our recommendations include ensuring that tenants have the opportunity to contribute to building security assessment reports and that possible remedial actions those assessment reports may include should be included in the legislation. Regulatory advocacy. On the regulatory front, the OTA provided comments on a number of important sister agency rulemakings. The Rental Housing Commission has published 3 proposed rulemakings to implement the fairness in renting legislation, focusing on new statutory requirements on housing providers regarding tenant screening and eviction notices. Thus far, in the successive proposed rulemakings, the Commission has incorporated a number of OTA's recommendations, including annually updating the list of languages in which a landlord must provide eviction notices. Shall I stop or continue where the landlord knows the tenant speaks one of those languages, and clarifying that a landlord may not file an eviction action for non-payment of rent where the tenant has paid the delinquent balance below $600 following the issuance of the eviction notice. In a footnote to my testimony, I note an apparent statutory contradiction on this point and the need for council clarification.
Well, let's pause there, Director. We have a lot of questions, so we'll get to most of it, and the entire testimony will be in the official record. Let's start with the SMART goals.
Well, that's the following part of the testimony.
That's why I say we're going to get to it. So there we go. So the first one was to finalize a rulemaking for publication in consultation with OAG regarding billing and lien authority for the Emergency Housing Assistance Program. That was the first goal you set last year. Where you landed, looks like you met with OAG and did some work on this, but has determined to take this on a case-by-case basis.
That is correct.
Can you say more about that conclusion, why that's the better avenue than rulemaking?
I'm going to allow Amir to speak to that since I assigned him the task of meeting with OAG and to look at the Department of Buildings, because we've had extensive conversations across the board with these 2 agencies about this. And I'll let him provide an update as to why we decided the case-by-case approach was more effective. Yes.
Good afternoon. The process, so we've devised a specific process to determine first and foremost which cases are appropriate for designation of lien recovery. That's a process that starts at OTA, and we have to make determination of whether the facts of the case qualify the landlord for recovery. So, for example, if there's a fire, we know it wasn't caused by the landlord. We're not going to go after the landlord for a recovery of the funds expended. However, if we do determine that there is a case where the housing provider has been negligent, and that the cause of the closure is the negligence of the landlord and failing to comply with the housing code violation notices, then at that point, we will put together a package. Our plan is to send a demand letter to the housing provider to attempt to recover those funds. If those funds are then not recovered, if we're unable to successfully negotiate some sort of settlement with the landlord, at that point, we will then begin communications with the Office of Attorney General. And the Office of Attorney General will then need to obtain the documentation from the Department of Buildings. It may be that it's a collaborative effort. It may be that subpoenas are required. And along with the proper documentation, we'll then need witness testimony to authenticate the documentation and enter them into evidence. So it's a process that requires some additional assistance other than the data itself.
Why not, though, do a rulemaking? So using the example you gave, the rule could be, where there is negligence. And so it's not too broad. So I'm still not following why the case by case as opposed to a rulemaking, which would seem to make the rules and processes more clear for folks and consistent.
I don't think it'll miss the fact of rulemaking. The issue initially this past year has been to clarify process. Who do we go to? Originally, it had been my thought that we would gather the information directly from the Department of Buildings, but it became obvious that it was going to require us to look at each case. In other words, fires were going to be set aside. The only thing I want to focus on are closures, because here's where we have a failure to comply with the building code. And the information that we needed from them, it appeared that it was easier to gather information on a case-by-case basis for each closure than it was for us to go in and say to the Department of Buildings, they wanted me to do a spreadsheet of all of the data that I was going to be required to need. And the problem was we didn't have all of the information that we needed from the Office of the Attorney General to determine how the case should be built. And so I said, let's start in the beginning from a demonstration standpoint to determine what will be the compilation factors that are required by OAG in order for us to bring a case forward.
And in terms of you bringing a case forward, how do you factor into your assessment the size of the building, or is that a factor? So if it's a 4-unit building versus a 100-unit building, does that make a difference?
Well, in cases of 4-unit buildings, in smaller properties, we are usually in contact with the smaller housing provider.
Mm-hmm.
We usually have more information about the circumstances of the housing provider and whether or not we can work with them. In most of those cases, they do not have the financial wherewithal to repay the hotel and other expenses related.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, the only way that we can absorb those dollars back is to lien.
And their insurance wouldn't cover it?
We would hope that they would. I mean, that it would seem to me that would be the first level that the housing provider would go to would be the insurance company.
That's their problem with it.
That's their problem.
Okay.
It's not mine.
Okay.
Mine is only to recover, council member, the funds that the government has expended with respects to these cases. And we have been doing this since 2009. So there's been millions upon millions of dollars that the government has put forward in dealing with ensuring that tenants have temporary housing when they have become temporarily homeless.
Okay.
And I think the time has just really come for us to say enough is already, because a lot of this is failure to comply with the building code, just point simple and blank. Once we have documented via DOB's notices of infraction and failure to abate, as well as inventory from our own files to see where tenants have called into us and complained about the lack. Example, today's case where infestation has been a prominent issue for this woman and her children. This goes on every day. I wish it didn't, but it's an everyday problem. Yesterday, it was a gentleman who has rats in the walls. This goes on every day somewhere in the city. And the time, and I keep asking myself, why are we still dealing with this high level of housing conditions where people are living in squalor? It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And we see it in the rapid rehousing program in large numbers, which I can't understand how government pays for tenants to live in these deplorable conditions, and we are paying the rent on tenants living in these types of housing. We need to stop it now.
We will continue to work with that in full agreement.
Yes.
Full agreement. Yeah. And yeah. So we'll continue to work with you on that because there has to be a level of accountability. One of the things you've suggested before that I keep noodling around in my mind is when a building gets sold, that the buyer needs to have some plan to bring it up to speed. Otherwise, the intention is probably not the best interest of the residents.
Well, that and replacement reserve accounts need to be instituted. I've been talking about this since 2006. The other concern I have is why isn't when I was on the task force for what was it called, Joe?
Preservation.
The preservation task force. It was my recommendation that they create the preservation program. That program is not functioning the way I envisioned that it should have. One, where we have small builders, in fact, or where we have naturally occurring affordable housing, it seems to me that those programs are ideal for the low-cost loans, or in sometimes, and I think you'll remember I had mentioned about granting some of those places where the cost to do the renovation was below $250,000. It seems to me that we need to go back and look at why that program is not moving so that we can ensure that people living in the housing, that they're living in housing that's in the 21st century and that things are being brought up to the level of energy needs that we need. Working with, the Lowe's, the Home Depots, these places to have them come in and donate the new bathroom needs that we have. And that kind of stuff will help us save money across the board as well as bring those properties up. The other thing is the DOPA program is not being utilized for us to buy these smaller units and bring them into a portfolio where we hire a management company to manage on behalf of the city until they can sell. But I think those are the kinds of things that are still not being, I think we have the legislation in place. We have the tools, but they're not being effectively put out there so that we're using them for the purposes that they were intended. And I do believe that, we've got the funds, we should use them while we can.
Let me go to the second
Goal?
Second goal. I lost my place.
The utility building or the rent stabilization? No.
The clinic, the
lease clinic?
The lease clinic, yes. So last year at our oversight hearing, at this hearing, you indicated one of your key goals would be the lease clinic that would consist of a presentation on residential lease rights in the district, followed by a clinical session for tenants to receive individual attention from OTA attorneys. It looks like, so that it's been a year, but it doesn't look like this one has happened.
It has not happened to date. We are in the process of looking at it from two perspectives. One, from the social media side, my attorney advisor has suggested to me that one of the things that we might want to consider, and I think he's absolutely right, is to bring it into social media where we're doing bites. One of the things we're finding out, because we've got all these educational programs, but every day when I read an ATD, I keep saying to myself, why are people calling us when we have all this stuff online? And I think it's the media that we're not using all of the media and sources that we can. So we're talking about looking at how we can break down that whole Lease Clinic, the aspects of the Lease Clinic, into bites so that people can ask one question. If it's one issue that they're after, they can go and we can give them a quick answer for what they're looking for. Sometimes people will not use educational tools until they absolutely need them. And the clinic, as you heard from the individual that talked to us today about universities and dealing with, as we had started out our conversation on the lease clinics with the universities, there was a specific reason that was a market that we focused on, because young people going into their third year of college, now they're also now moving into apartments for the first time. It's a major undertaking for both them and their parents who are paying those contractual rents. You had suggested to me that you wanted me to broaden it and to open it up to the entire city. We are looking into dealing again with the community to determine how we best do that. So yes, it got stuck because we had some other emergencies that came up last year. I apologize for us not moving. Well, and Joel's just telling me that our time frame for completion is FY25. So we still have a little bit of time to satisfy your request.
Okay, good. 2 years is a long time for that goal. And again, like we're all in this together. So, I would say two things. One, if it's important, then we got to make it happen. And if it's not important, then it's the wrong SMART goal.
Right.
But I think it is important. Just a recommendation to chew on. It probably because it's the most recent time I saw this was yesterday. But there's some young folks in the district who are contracting social media services. And I don't know if TikTok is running today, but I'll tell you, if you wanted people to consume things in a bite-sized, digestible way that's stored somewhere that they can go to anytime, go back to, might be worth talking to some of these young folks about that. It was your mention of social media that made me think about it. But we'll continue to work with you on this and offer any support that you need to get it done.
And we will also, when meeting with Francesca on a monthly basis and the team, provide them with our progress reports too, as we're moving the ball.
Thank you. The third SMART goal was to propose legislation related to hidden and unfair utility costs. You reported that you held a mini summit about utility billing last September, and that
Yes.
you will be presenting this, the committee, with a comprehensive memo, including examples of
By the
best
first-
practices.
Yes, in March, you will receive that.
Excellent. And we also get, OTA sends us monthly data on 5 key performance indicators. So I want to thank you for getting us that data each month. A few questions related to those. You've been sharing eviction numbers. Most evictions are occurring in Ward 7 and 8 by pretty significant proportion. And you focus a lot of your outreach and ward-specific events in those wards too. Why are the eviction numbers so high in wards 7 and 8? Do you have a sense of why?
They don't pay the rent.
Okay. It is. So if that's the issue, if that's the underlying issue, how does outreach help with that, or does it?
I don't think it's a social issue. It's a lack of understanding priorities when you become adults. And it goes to the training that I think is important And one of the things that, you know, I've struggled with in terms of teaching issues about housing in the younger years. I think it's important that we instill the responsibility, the financial responsibilities that we all have to assume at some point in time. But in order to do that, we have to instill earlier on in young people how important it is. When I managed public housing, council member, I used to have a sign in my office that said, before you tell me your story, look at all the ones I've heard. Don't tell me the baby needs new shoes, that you had to fix the car tire, you had to do this, because there was consistently a reason why the rent hadn't been paid. And so at the bottom of my list, it said, the bottom line is if you don't pay, you can't stay. The first person that I ever evicted was a woman whose rent was $21 a month, and she owed the authority $10,854. She was the first person I got out. And the question then to the authority, here I come from the National Corporation for Housing Partnerships, where we had 88,000 units in 44 states. I could not understand why someone whose rent was $21 a month had been able to, first of all, live that long into a property. But there is a sociological phenomena that goes along with property. If you live in a household where your mother was on welfare all her life and she didn't pay that rent and you were a kid growing up, you think that that's okay. You've learned that it's not something that you are expected to do. And so when it's your turn and you reach that age, and I saw this happen, the psychological impact that goes along with certain property habits is very, very detrimental. I've got a reason why I don't pay the rent. I sat on a panel with Matt Damon, the author of Evicted, and I told the same story. There's always two sides to the story, and then there's somewhere in there is the truth. It's a sociological illness that we have not been able to eliminate for a very, very long time.
It's one we need to take seriously because
Understood.
things are changing as this housing market gets more stressed.
Yes.
And I try to help folks understand, if a large percentage of people in a building don't pay their rent, that puts everybody in that building in jeopardy.
But it's also an issue it's also an issue of a government who does two things. On one side of the spectrum, we provide assistance to individuals with low incomes. We provide them with funding. And normally the funding that we provide them with is on behalf of children. Then they don't use the portion of that behalf of children funding that comes from your federal dollars to ensure that the rent is paid, because there is a portion that is calculated into that amount that is specifically for housing costs. So they don't use that, but they've learned that in our city in particular, that we have an emergency housing program. And they go to the emergency housing program after they haven't paid the rent for 6 months and they apply. Mm-hmm. And now they take from our local tax dollars the funds that they receive, and that now pays the rent that should have been paid all along. I think that we have to start looking at how do we make a connection between co-authoring of financing so that the children are not homeless, because that's who we are putting in shelters, children.
Well, on the eviction piece, what role does OTA play in preventing evictions, or if any?
We meet with every client that calls into our office on a daily basis. If in fact the problem, and we get many, many calls where the tenants ask, can we withhold rent? Mm-hmm. We inform them that it is not the policy of the Office of the Tenant Advocate to encourage you to hold back your rent. If the problem has to do with housing code violations and the reason that you are not paying your rent, then that's where an intervention time, we do the investigation and also work with the Department of Buildings to determine, is this particular landlord in non-compliance Where there is a non-compliant issue, we also encourage the tenant to journalize all of the events that are associated with the failure to have habitability. We're teaching them that. So we deal with prevention issues or instructions to the tenant on how they can begin to develop their argument for the court hearing.
So if they are already in eviction proceedings and they reach out to OTA, is there anything you can do to assist at that point?
I think Amir would tell you that we look at the cases, and if the case has, if there are elements within the case that justify intervention on the behalf of the Office of the Tenant Advocate, we will intervene, particularly where we can provide evidence to the court that there is a reason why this rent has not been paid. He's opened up his mic, so he wants to talk.
Well, absolutely. Ms. Shreve is correct. We have a twofold approach. One is a preventative approach, and one is an approach where we assess tenants who are already in eviction proceedings. You asked earlier why we focus so much of our education and outreach resources in Ward 7 and 8. And of course, there's a correlation and a causatory effect between being a low-income tenant and being more likely to be evicted. What we want to do is in those areas where there are more low-income tenants, we also understand that the tenants' living conditions are worse and that they're more likely to have defenses to evictions because there may be housing code violations that the housing provider needs to fix before they're able to evict tenants. So we want to focus our education and outreach efforts in those areas where the tenants have lower access to legal resources and financial resources, first and foremost. However, once they get to us, then if they are in the process of being evicted, we absolutely provide legal advice in how to prevent eviction from happening. We partner and collaborate with other organizations, agencies, and law firms in providing representation to tenants. And now that we are beginning our litigation practice, we are actually going to engage in more eviction defense litigation to avoid eviction altogether.
But Councilmember, the city pays, I think there are 5 or 6 legal organizations that have been provided with funding specifically for this purpose. We're not one of them.
Understood. You also report on intakes to your office broken down by topic. Top 3 issues, it seems like every month, are lease issues, code violations, and evictions. How has the topic of intakes impacted how you use the resources of your office?
Say that again. Say it to me in another way.
It's fair. So you all receive intakes through a number of means.
Yes.
There are 3 categories that are the most common.
Yes.
It's lease issues, evictions, and code violations.
Yeah.
So does the fact that so much of the concentration of the intake people coming and saying these are the problems, does that change how you operate your office, where you put your resources, the public education you do, or anything like that?
The answer is no. I mean, because we triage with Department of Buildings. When staff receives calls about building conditions, if it comes through the ATD, we have a direct relationship with the Department of Buildings and inspectors. When I read every ATD every day.
What's that? Ask the director.
They ask the directors, which is the hotline. I read them every day. And when I read them, I determine whether or not this is something that we should take an action on now. Sometimes it requires us to go back to the tenant and say, do you want us to do limited representation for you, in order for us to even pick up the phone and call that landlord. Sometimes it requires us to call directly to the Department of Buildings and ask them to send someone out to investigate and to validate for my satisfaction that, in fact, the condition that has been outlined in this ATD is in fact valid. Because you have to validate everything first. You can't just make an assumption. once we do that, we have a variety of means by which we go about addressing every ATD that comes in. Sometimes it is only an informational basis where we are providing you with the information to empower you to do what you can do to change the dialogue relating to your particular problem. But it has not changed the manner by which we operate, because on a daily, weekly basis, the 5 attorneys that we have, they have somewhere between 20 and 30 cases, intake cases a week that they are addressing. The ATDs are dealing with about 40 intakes a week. So responding to the issues that we have depends on the issue that has been presented before. So Joel is writing me some notes and I cannot read it. So what is he saying? Put on your thing and talk.
In addition to all that, just you asked about education outreach as well. And 2 of the core presentations that we've done ever since the start of the agency practically have been Lease 101 and
Renter's rights.
basic rights, including
Okay. Yeah.
housing code violations and. what to
Okay,
do.
I appreciate it. I was gonna, go there to better understand the public education piece. On the lease issues, which are the number one intake topic, you noted that about 25% of lease issues involve illegal lease provisions. Does that mean that 25% had confirmed illegal provisions, or that 25% of the calls were about provisions that may or may not be illegal?
There may or may not be legal.
Okay.
I mean, we are seeing these creative measures that housing providers are taking to find ways to suck those dollars in. And one that's very troubling to me is on the move out side. Normally, normal wear and tear is in a provision in the lease. But what we're beginning to see is that every time somebody moves out, they're being told that they have to professionally clean that unit. They go beyond the bar of just normal wear and tear.
See.
Or you'll see move out fees that are not associated with the move out. So where I believe we had said that all fees should be listed so that everybody's on the same page when you move in and you move out, a lot of these mysterious fees come up at the end. Or where we see single family housing that is rented, there has been a significant, we're going to keep your security deposit. The 45-day rule that you need to, the 30 days you have to let me know if you've got a problem. You've done a walkthrough. You don't tell us that you have a problem, but then before the end of the 75 days, we still don't know you have a problem, but no, you're not getting that security deposit back. I mean, it's just amazing to me, the kinds of things that people are doing now in terms of keeping these young people's money. And we're not talking about $300 or $400 in cases. We're talking about $2,000. And the notion that the landlord is supposed to maintain that security deposit in an escrow account has gone out the window. It's clear when you read these documents over and over that the money has been spent. So they're trying to figure out a way how I don't have to pay this guy that money back. I have to come up with a means by which to say, you violated this, that, or the other, and now I'm not going to give you your money back. Or you have to paint the unit, or you have to have the floors redone, or the carpeting was, I mean, it's just, if you can appreciate.
What's the average intake is between 350 and 400 per month, but October seems to spike, September and October. I think last year.
We changed our telephone system.
Okay, what were those changes? I saw that in some of the, I think, expenses or priorities. I can't remember.
Right, we went to Octo and talked to them about, I wanted to update the phone system to be more au courant, if you will, with the world we live in today. I wanted to make sure that calls that I had been receiving sometimes from council members where tenants had complained that we had not call them back? I said, well, I have to have a way to know that every call that was made, we received. And so we spent $4,500 with an upgrade on our phone system, and it improved tremendously the number of calls that we started getting.
It still though went back down though, in November and December, dropped back down.
Yeah, holidays.
Okay. So you
Christmas,
expect the
Thanksgiving.
new normal to be roughly the 600. This isn't, I guess what I'm asking is the September, October numbers that we're seeing from last year, this is not an annual spike. This is, you think, related to the change in the
I do
cost?
think it's related to the
Okay.
change in our system. Joe wants to give a comment on this too.
Yeah,
You should write it.
in speaking over the last several years in preparation for these hearings with our administrative assistant who does the emergency housing program, she actually has some insight into where some of those September, October complaints are coming from.
Mhm.
It's just the start of the cold season or end of the hot season that is dragging on longer than like the air conditioning is going to stay on.
Yeah.
And the complaints when they start coming in are, of course, if it's a freezing cold day in December, we're going to get a lot of complaints.
Yes.
But a lot of those complaints start coming in when the turnover is supposed to
I
happen.
see.
from
That
AT&T.
makes sense.
And the other thing, council member, you might recall on 1433 Columbia Road, we had an explosion on September the 18th.
Mhm.
And there were 200 tenants impacted by it in a 55-unit building.
Yeah. Okay. On EHAP, you also send us the total EHAP spending, and the dollar amount returned to tenants from things like settlements, and ask the director inquiries for each month. I do see a lot of value in the eviction and intake numbers. I'm less sure about the number of director inquiries. Why is that metric important?
The hotline?
The ask the director inquiries each month, the number of ask the director inquiries each month.
Why is it important?
Yeah, why is that something that it's important to track each month?
Because you asked for it.
So
But it's mandated by law. I have to have a hotline. That is a statutory requirement.
Okay. To be clear for the public though, for the SMART goals and the KPIs, I try for us not to be the ones to identify what they are. These should relate to, key priorities of the agency or key missions of the agencies.
But it is a mission of the agency. I mean, we elected to do an online hotline. We're in discussions as to whether or not that should remain as an online hotline. I'm in discussion with the gentleman to my right about that as we speak. So, it may change, but right now, that was the system that I elected back in 2006 because of the limited staff that I had.
Mhm.
And if it's not the most effective means, we will be discussing it at the executive level internally to determine how to best utilize staff that we're using for that purpose now.
But the ask the director calls, those are intakes, right? Or those?
No, the ASTA directors are online. Those come directly, all come online, and they come from all over the United States. They don't just come to us from DC. We get them from New Mexico. We get them from New Jersey. People write us from all over the country.
I don't even know if you should be answering them from other states.
Well,
I don't know if you're allowed to.
Well,
Be
we
honest.
do. We when they write us, we go, but we can't provide you with any guidance. You need to contact
Right.
this office.
Okay.
But we're the only office of our kind, remember, in the country,
I
so.
hear it, funded by DC tax dollars to help DC residents. But I guess, okay, so when you send us data on intakes, that does not include ask the director inquiries?
I think
No, it does.
it does. At the bottom, it shows as ask the director, as ATD.
Okay, so that's the clarity of my question.
Okay.
Why break that part out?
Can I just weigh in that so the ATDs tend to circulate to different branches as well. And so policy will be asked about a ATD about a policy question, but a lot of them overlap with what are really intake issues. I think everyone would agree. So that an ATD can certainly lead to an intake, or it could help to resolve a potential dispute with the landlord that might materialize later, and they've taken action based on the information they're getting. So I think it's an important component of intake,
Okay.
personally.
Okay. So you moved to a new phone system where all the callers leave voicemails and staff then calls them back. And you reported that your new system has made intake operation more efficient, resulting in a noticeable increase in intake calls. What metrics did you use to determine the efficacy of the new system?
It was basically a conversation with Octo about how we could use the new system, the new phone system, to provide us with more information than we were receiving under the old method. And I can't give you, there were some technical issues that raised the bar for us, in addition to meeting, which was one of my big criterias. I don't want council member calling me, telling me that we're not answering our phones when I know we are. So it also gives me the ability to go back into the system and to record and look at every phone call that comes into the Office of the Tenant Advocate.
And the calls that go out.
And the calls that go out. And a lot of times people call and say they called us when, and you'd have staff researching the way we maintain calls at that time to see, when was this call made? Did we receive it? And a lot of times people don't recognize, if you don't tell us who you are, no, we can't capture the fact that you did call us. Because even previously, before we got the new system, staff every morning, their message light was on and they were returning phone calls to people. But if you don't give us an information to call you back, well, you might have called us, but we weren't able to call you. So it helped me to have better control. I can see every phone call in the office. I can see who gets the calls, where the calls go to, where they're assigned. It gives me the ability to look at reports that I didn't have the chance to in the past.
Okay. I'll say this for any of the public watching that doesn't have context. I've been on the council for 8 years and some months. I may have received 1 or 2 complaints that the office didn't call back. And, I know that, it happens from time to time, but, and all that to say, I appreciate you proactively addressing the issue. I don't think it's like, the office does not have a reputation for non-responsiveness.
Right.
But just so everybody is clear, it seems like you're taking steps to make sure you don't ever get anywhere near that.
That is correct.
I appreciate that. How do you how do you measure, other than interactions with residents or responses, how do you measure the effectiveness of the office? Because it's hard to know, like, we have numbers on how many people get evicted. I don't know that we have any numbers on how many people avoid eviction because they got assistance from OTA or things like that. Measuring what didn't happen is difficult. So how do you measure the effectiveness of the office in your the highest level missions?
Most of it is from feedback from the tenant community when they write to us or write to the attorney that assisted them on a particular matter. Or through the financial returns on investment that we see, as in this case, was over $250,000 this past year. Those are my barometers for, are we being effective? I did talk to my E&O staff about surveys. Can we do surveys? Well, monkey surveys cost money. You can get a certain amount for free, but the rest of it costs money. But I'm looking into utilizing that particular resource this year to see whether or not I get what kind of feedback I can get and I'm going to pursue with the staff what other means are available to us to look at how can we find out immediately, as in the system of the world that we live in now, you know that when you go to Ace Hardware, 2 minutes later, they're sending you an email saying, gee, will you take this survey? And every place that we go to in today's society, somebody wants you to give them a feedback survey, whether it's CVS or wherever. Everybody's looking to see how they can increase their business with you. And again, it would give us an opportunity to find out, did we give you the services you were asking for? And is there something else that we can do for you? The danger in that, of course, council members, is that it requires more staff.
Yeah.
Which I don't have.
But it will create a record for the
Yes.
need, which will help us in getting the council to support more staff. And I will say as well, I believe in feedback so much because I think folks who don't want feedback don't want to get better. This agency is not a problem agency. The best thing to do is to stay ahead of that. So the more feedback you get, the better. And my promise to you is if you start showing up with negative feedback, I'm going to thank you for getting the feedback. I'm not going to come down on you because you got negative feedback. And then we're going to talk about how do we address it, which makes
Right.
more resources.
Right.
But I do appreciate you, pushing forward with the idea of looking to see how to get feedback.
No, we are.
Excellent.
And because now that we've moved into new digs,
Mhm.
as you well know, November, we had to pick it up and move it. So we're now at 899 North Capitol Street. The staff does like their new environment, don't you, staff?
Blink twice.
Yeah, I think you guys do, don't you like their new, I think they really do like their new. No, they like their new offices, and you guys should come to see the new 899 building. It's full of DC government employees.
I'd love to come see. We'll
Yeah,
be able to see.
the DC inspectors are down the hall from us. And the one thing about it, the security in this building is something to be envied. You have a fob. It only lets you get off on the floor that you work on.
That's
Yeah.
good.
But there is a pool room, there's a pool hall on the second floor. And there's space on the first floor to hold a conference, a summit. I mean, they thought about a lot of different things when they designed the building. The exercise room is a little small, and there's no lockers right there.
Need hefty weights for you.
But no, I mean, it's different. It's a different property, and certainly it's an update from being at the Reeve Center, which we did call home for a long time. We liked it there, but I think we were impressed. I was very upset about moving, primarily because of the location.
Yes.
It gave us for all tenants in the city. But I think that the space that they moved us into is quite nice.
That's great.
Nobody plays.
No time, too many complaints coming in. Let me challenge you on something that it's nobody in any government I know has perfected this, which is outreach. You all, based on the data we get, interact with a lot of tenants. And
Yes.
you reported over 800 tenants have attended renters' rights training in the last year. So I'm not suggesting there's a problem there. But that said, how are those events advertised?
They are advertised. I wish I had somebody from here today. They do a tremendous job. They provide information at every tabling, that the activity they go to. They maintain it on our website. We have over 100 tenant associations in the tenant peer program now. They advertise through that. The nonprofits we have a few MOUs, and those are growing with nonprofit organizations that we do training with, that they use also to feed, to let people know about our coursework. And then we also have the podcasts that are on YouTube that people can go to every day. They don't need us for those particular courses, and I forget the number that they told me that they had got, the hits that they had gotten on the YouTube channels, which I thought was promising. And again, Amir and I are now in discussions about these minute type of, the ticky-tock type of stuff. I don't think we have ticky-tock anymore, do we? But they're gone for the moment anyway. But we're looking at that as a new avenue to start doing stuff. We spent 10 grand last year on the bus, not the buses, but the bus stations. And their things run, they're smoothly run. So I think they used a variety of ways to connect. And I only have 4 people in that department. They are working 24/7. How they have been able to cover all of the wards is amazing to me. But they are working 24/7.
I like it.
And they know a lot about what's going on in some of the troubled properties in various areas of the city that they bring to my attention. So I'm proud of that team. I'm very proud of that team.
Well, let me thank that team as well. The numbers, the data show that they're doing a great job. I hope they won't rest on their laurels. Keep looking for gaps.
No, I'm
it seems
sure
like
they will.
are. Yeah,
I'm sure they will.
Wanted to just finally discuss legislative priorities. And earlier in our discussion of SMART goals, we talked about your forthcoming memo with recommendations to address hidden and unfair utility costs.
Right.
But your pre-hearing responses mentioned some other legislative actions as well. I think it was in your testimony you mentioned the LAMP Act, or maybe in response to a question.
Yes.
So we're good on that, and I think the previous witnesses did an excellent job of explaining that. We do hear frequently from constituents about building conditions. You mentioned that at the top of your testimony. Can you summarize this, to the extent that we haven't covered it? We mentioned some of the things that I have them in my notes. Some of the things that you've mentioned about, like, reserve funds and making sure that a new buyer has a plan to restore buildings. Is there anything else we need to be thinking about in terms of the preservation of housing? In here, I'm talking about conditions, having dignified conditions in older housing that tends to be more affordable. So with respect to building conditions,
The infrastructures. I think the plumbing and the electrical sides are extremely important to hone in on. We find that, that there's weaknesses in those systems. A lot of it then recreates, if you will, the leakages that come from one unit to another because those pipes bust and break. As you may very well be aware, the older the pipe, the more potential for pinhole leaks in the pipe. Once the pinhole leaks start, it goes into the infrastructure of the building, which then causes unit after unit to be more weakened. And I think that herein lies where that preservation program, the funds that are, that live at DHCD need to be utilized. There needs to be a public campaign that they're getting out there and helping us to preserve these older affordable properties. Because if we provide them with the right kinds of financing or grant money, it means that the rents don't have to go up. You see, and that the government can put, if it's the loan, the government can put the requirements of payback on the end when the property is sold. So we get paid our money back, but we don't have to increase the rents on the tenants by doing some improvements. And those energy improvements are critical. We reduce toxin exposures to both elderly as well as young people by doing this. So the electrical and the plumbing systems of those older properties need to be upgraded, because at some point, everything rots out.
Mhm.
Nothing stays the same.
Okay. I'm going to do some thinking around that, to the extent that you all have further ideas on that, let us know, and we'll reach out to you as we have
I
questions.
think I'll come back to you with a program that you can actually propose yourself and do.
Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm serious. That we need to do this.
My most recent note was we got to move on these things.
Yes,
So-
we do.
Yes, so we'll follow up after the hearing, because I would like us to get moving. The problems are too persistent, and they're getting worse and not better.
That's exactly correct. And it troubles me. When you see this year's annual report, you will see what my message says. It's troubling to me that after all this time, we're still talking about the same thing.
And all this money.
And all this money.
Yes. Well, I appreciate it. I want to thank you and your team for your ongoing work and assistance to residents. We refer a lot of people to OTA, and I know that you all have some high caseload. Actually, couple questions. That reminds me. Sorry, almost got out of here.
Just a few more questions.
Just a few. Overtime. I don't think we've gotten a response on overtime. That's usually not a problem, but I always, it's the type of thing that comes up in the news if you don't pay attention to it. So I just want to make sure we're going to get a response on overtime spending sometime soon.
Rebecca, she's bringing up the numbers, but I will tell you as she's pulling the numbers up, that the only branch in the agency that would require overtime on a regular basis would be the E&O, the out branch, because they work on Saturdays.
Mhm.
They work after hours. That's the only place that we would accumulate overtime. But what?
Neither of my staff to cover their ears.
Go ahead. Rebecca's going to give it to you.
Hi, good afternoon. Rebecca Berry, Agency Fiscal Officer. In FY '24, the agency spent $3,868 in overtime, and in fiscal year '25 to date, $1,237 in
Good job.
overtime.
Okay. If there was a problem, we would have seen it in previous years. I didn't think there was a problem there, but
Yeah, no, we're not abusive on it, but where we do have it is in the E&O branch, because that's where they work weekends,
Mhm.
when required and that sort of stuff. But it's not like we have $20 and $30 and $50,000 worth of overtime.
Okay. And the other two responses I want to flag are question 34 on pending lawsuits.
We have Miss Sun. Miss Sun is the only lawsuit we've had since 2012.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And she used to testify, didn't she? Did she used to testify at our hearings?
Oh, I'm sure if she hasn't, I'm surprised you haven't seen her.
I think we did. I think we had her a few years. Some people fell off during COVID.
Yeah. We had an audit. We had an audit request, and we have forgotten to tell you about that. But the Kathy Patterson staff contacted us, sent us an engagement letter. We met with them, the entire team. We met with them. It is my understanding, based on feedback I was just most recently given, they were very impressed with their meeting with us. We were very forthcoming. The audit was regarding the database. And Amir has just received a new request, which he and I discussed yesterday, from their team they've now read all of the documentation that we provided them with at their request, and they want to meet with him. He is our contact person for this particular engagement. So he was our contract administrator for the database. So he will be responding to them, but there's nothing that we've done that we can't stand to the test on, because we did what we were asked to do.
Excellent.
So.
Last thing, I believe, is the average caseload per attorney. Is that, can you get back to us relatively in the next, let's say, week on that?
Yeah, that was one of the non-asterisk questions, I believe.
I see asterisks here, but I don't know what they indicate.
Well, hold on, the mayor thinks he has it in the top of his head, so we
Yeah,
can
no,
tell you right
we
now.
included that information. We had one attorney who was out of the office on an illness-related issue for a significant period, so we didn't include him. But the average caseload, it ranged somewhere between 800 and 900 and some change. The average was about 865 for fiscal year 2024.
I'm saying, can you say that number again?
865
Cases.
new cases, yes.
Okay.
And now, one of the questions is, what do you mean by average caseload, right? And, do you mean ongoing cases that they're working on, or new cases that come in and get resolved and get sort of put aside? But if the question is new intakes per attorney, the average was approximately 865 for fiscal year 24.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll talk further. Just I don't know, like the responding to a case versus ongoing interaction with that particular case is a little different. And I just want to understand the caseload for the agency, and specifically the attorneys in the agency.
Happy to.
And we still owe you for FY25 to date. The FY24, Joey says, was a midnight submission, so you got it very late.
Okay, I appreciate
Last
it.
night.
We'll take a look at it.
We give it as it goes, as it comes.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you all very, very much. And thank you for being with us today, directed to you and your team. And of course, I want to thank our public witnesses and our other government witnesses as well. For anyone who was not able to testify today, written testimony is encouraged and will be made part of the official record. Anyone who is interested may submit a testimony by email to the Committee on Housing at housing@dccouncil.gov. The record for this hearing will remain open until the close of business 1 week from today on Thursday, February 6th. Finally, if anyone listening is interested in learning more about the work of this committee in my office, please sign up to hear from us at robertwhiteatlarge.com. With that, the business before this committee is concluded. The time is 12:49 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.